Chapter 61, An Intense World of Competition. Qilong was not one to back down from a fight. Hearing what Li Yingji said, he rolled his eyes and replied, "Too much? So what if I'm too much? You've something to say about it?" Sometimes Qilong was outright shameless because he didn't need to think about the consequences. He believed that his good friend Han Jijian would definitely come to his rescue, and now he also had boss at his back, causing him to become even more impudent. Of course, at his back, his solid shields Ling Lan and Han Jijian weren't as light-hearted. They shared a commiserating look, wry smiles on their faces. Han Jijian, in particular, was rather troubled. He found that Qilong was becoming more and more reckless, which wasn't a good thing. He decided that he would need to sit Qilong down and give him a good brainwashing soon when no one else was around. Qilong's words finally set off Lackey Number 1, who was standing behind Li Yingji. He jumped out raging, "Punk, do you know who he is?" "The third grandson of the Li family head." Qilong picked at his ear, indicating that he wasn't deaf and that he had heard everything clearly the first time. He is also the number 1 ranking student in this year's special class, the most promising scout student in the Federation this year. The pride on Lackey Number 1's face made it seem as if the number 1 rank belonged to himself. Li Yingji's face was also full of smugness. He was very proud of the fact that he had managed to stand out among the masses with his skills, obtaining the coveted position of first place. First place? Qilong cast a searching look at Li Yingji. The smug fellow didn't feel that strong. The presence seeping from his body wasn't even a match for his own, not to mention against his boss's. Qilong had already had a taste of his boss Lan's indistinct yet menacing trace of malevolent aura, and knew that it was not to be taken lightly. Qilong's natural gift was his strong intuition, in Han Jijian's words, animal instinct. He didn't have to think much, being able to accurately gauge an opponent's strength just via pure intuition. Sensing that the first place of this year's Special Class A was not even a match for himself, Qilong's mood took a dark turn, and his attitude became even meaner. With clear disdain, he said, "So what?" This answer was obviously not according to script, sending the opponent into an immediate apoplectic rage. The others also burst out laughing. Qilong was absolutely the type that could cause someone to keel over dead out of sheer anger, and the most frightening thing was that he himself wouldn't even be aware why the other died. Wait till our boss comes after you." Lackey Number 2 was also moved to help. "Is that so? Then I'll be waiting," said Qilong shortly, still looking at Li Yingji with contempt. Qilong's impudence was because he had the utmost confidence in himself, and he also believed that no one could best him aside from his own boss. Furthermore, even if he did sht the bed, there was still boss to pick up after him. He had faith that boss Lan would not just stand by while his own followers were being bullied. In any case, Qilong was already shamelessly counting on Ling Lan. Qilong's words caused Li Yingji's cheeks to puff up like a toad's in anger. However, he still had the mind to maintain the poise of a member of an elite family, and chose not to start a fight right then and there. In the end, he only glared darkly at Qilong, and left with these words, "Just you wait." The waters of the Scout Academy were truly deep. Li Yingji still remembered the cautionary words of his father, before he fully figured out how things stood in the Scout Academy. He should not move recklessly. His father had also mentioned that the main principle in the school was survival of the fittest. It was almost impossible to dominate within the school by relying on one's family background or wealth unless you managed to buy the loyalty of some of the more formidable students to be part of your guard. Otherwise, he could only suck it up even if he were bullied by the commoner children within the school. His family would not intervene, so he could only rely on himself to resolve any problems. He had reservations because of his father's words, so he decided that he would hold off for now. After he had gained a better understanding of the school and had built up his own power base, then there would be plenty of opportunities for him to discipline that impudent fellow and teach him what's what. Li Yingji was very confident. With his own abilities and his family background, there was no reason he would lose to anyone in the academy. Since the master had left, the lackeys were sure to follow, but the fierce glares they left behind was a clear sign that the matter wasn't over. Nevertheless, this was now a matter for the future. Li Jingong released a heavy breath. Finally, he was rid of that annoyance. Why do you hate him so much? I heard he was a strong contender to be the next family head. Han Jijian was curious. The struggles within the Li family had always been intense. Every generation, the crowning of the family head was always the result of a descendant of the main family stepping up to bend all the other contenders to his will by force. The so-called hierarchy of inheritance was just an empty promise. According to the survival principles of the elite families, Li Jingong, a branch family member, should be doing his best to kiss up to Li Yingji. Li Jingong's expression dimmed, and he said, I really don't like him. No matter how talented he is, I still won't like him. You all don't know. But our eldest cousin brother is really nice. All of us children in the branch families really like him. But unfortunately, abruptly, Li Jingong's expression hardened with determination. Regardless of the result, I will never stand on the opposite side of my eldest cousin brother. This way, won't you offend Li Yingji? Han Jijian shook his head. Li Jingong's way of thinking was really unsuitable for survival in a large elite family like the Li family. The consequence of being led by one's emotions was often becoming mere cannon fodder in the crossfire. If Li Yingji really ended up becoming the family head, Li Jingong's actions now would guarantee that he would have no place within the Li family in the future. It's fine. Who knows if a child more talented than him would appear in the future. Li Jingong did not believe that it would be so easy for Li Yingji to just claim the position of family head. In this generation, due to his eldest cousin brother's mediocrity, all the children of the main family were champing at the bit. Hidden maneuvers abounded as they all fought with their sights set on the position of family head. Not to mention, even if Li Yingji really got lucky and managed to inherit, I am not afraid. I'm prepared to become a professional soldier, so the Li family can't touch me in the future. Li Jingong laid out his plans, stating why he wasn't afraid of offending Li Yingji now. He didn't want to see his favorite elder cousin brother forced to lose the position of family head and being put into captivity for the rest of his life. So, he decided to leave the messy quagmire of the Li family as early as possible. What he couldn't see couldn't hurt him. This was the reality of a large elite family. The complex environment full of cruelty and bloodshed forced the children within it to grow up so quickly. Welcome then. Han Jijian really liked Li Jingong's personality. Planning out his future so early, and pursuing it with determination, ignoring all the miscellaneous distractions along the way. This type of person would succeed easily. Han Jijian liked making friends with people like this because they wouldn't give him any trouble. Yup, one troublemaking Qilong was more than enough. Thank you. Han Jijian refused to accept a second one. The 10 people of Group 072 did not get hung up on the matter for long and continued to feast and be merry. At this moment, Ling Lan was still unaware that her future would be full of entanglements with the Li family. In the afternoon, they toured the entire campus grounds of the Scout Academy. Halfway through, when they passed by a combat hall, Qilong had dragged Ling Lan in for a fight. Naturally, Ling Lan pummeled Qilong soundly. However, despite his swollen eyes and bruised nose, Qilong continued to keep a silly grin on his face. Seeing his full mouth of white teeth on display, one could just tell he was really very simple and was a masochist to boot. After eating lunch, Ling Lan had already arranged the time for her pickup with her family. When it was about time, she bid farewell to these companions of Group 072. Perhaps it was just the way of this world that the children were so mature and intelligent, in such a way that Ling Lan did not feel at all annoyed or bored when interacting with them. Of course, she was also exceptionally patient, because these adorable children with varying personalities had triggered her maternal instincts to the max. With reluctance, the children accompanied Ling Lan to the school gates, especially Qilong, who strongly requested Ling Lan to convince her parents to let her stay with them at school. According to him, being able to fight with Boss Lan every day, it was also just thinking about it. Learning of Qilong's plans, Ling Lan, who had originally started considering staying at the school after all, decisively dismissed the idea completely. Damn it. She definitely had no interest to cross moves with Qilong every day. This fellow fought like a maniac, and was as stubborn as a cockroach. Although she was confident in defeating him, she couldn't be certain how long it would take, so it was overall a troublesome labor which exhausted both her mind and body. The school gates were shut tight. All was silent, and there was no one around. When the guard at the gates saw Ling Lan's group coming out, he immediately rushed forward to stop them. Ling Lan's group was still dressed in their own clothes, so the guard couldn't tell which class they were from. As today was registration day, the school did not restrict the children's dressing, but from tomorrow onwards, the students of the Central Scout Academy would have to put on their individual uniforms, otherwise they would find it very difficult to get around the Scout Academy. With regards to the Scout Academy uniforms, there were a total of 4 colors. These colors were not for distinguishing between the lower grades and the upper grades, but were meant to distinguish between the classes. This taught the children to recognize what rank and privilege were from the very beginning, and about what survival of the fittest meant. The school uniforms resembled the Federation military uniforms and looked very smart when worn. The color of the Special Class A uniforms was a vibrant red, and the edges of its sleeves and collar were also different from the other classes. They were decorated with gold patterns, an understated nod to luxury. The uniform represented the school's hopes for these children. May they blaze as brightly as the red of their coats, and finally become one of the dazzling battle stars of the Federation. According to school rules, when facing a child wearing the red uniform of Special Class A, children wearing uniforms of any other color, regardless of their grade level, would have to give way. Of course, if someone from Special Class A insulted a child wearing a uniform in any other color, the child had the right to challenge the other to combat during the large-scale ranking every 6 months. All consequences to be borne by the involved parties, of course. Meanwhile, Special Class B had white uniforms. Special Class B consisted of children who were just a shade weaker than the Special Class A kids. In the future, it was possible that they could achieve the heights of the Special Class A kids, but they could also end up becoming a mediocre member of the military. Therefore, the white of their uniform was a message, telling them that their future was up to them to color in. What color it became in the end was all up to their own individual efforts. Then, the uniforms of the merit classes were blue, while the regular classes were green. Both these colors symbolized sources of life. The school wanted to tell the children through these colors that they were an indispensable part of the Federation. Of course, the color of one's school uniform was not set in stone. As long as you worked hard, there was a chance to move up every 6 months. The school would be impartial in rearranging the classes based on the newest rankings. The 50 slots of Special Class A were the prize being fought over by over tens of thousands of students, while the original Special Class kids would have to give it their all to keep their spots. From the very first day of school, the Central Scout Academy had already started teaching the children that this was an unbelievably intense world of competition. Chapter 62, An Intentional Arrangement. When the guard found out that Ling Lan was a member of Special Class A, who had also chosen to be a day student, he was dumbfounded. After so many years of being a guard at the school, this was still the first time he had met a day student. From this, we can see that the freedom to be a day student offered by the school was basically just an empty privilege. It's obvious if you think about it. With such a competitive system in place, every student would wish that they could spend the 24 hours each day as if they were 48 hours. Who'd be willing to waste time commuting back and forth from school? Although the guard was shocked, he still let Ling Lan out of the gates without comment. Of course, Qilong and the other kids were mercilessly locked within the gates, who asked them to choose to board at school. Upon becoming a boarder, students were not allowed to take even half a step out of school grounds outside of specified times, even if one was a Special Class student. Ling Lan waved goodbye to her companions and stepped out of the school gates. Right outside, the Ling family hover car was already parked, waiting. This time, the Ling family had sent out 5 hover cars, and Ling Lan's main escort was the only non-betrayer of the rescue team, Ling Yu. Chamberlain Lincoln hadn't come because he was busy wrapping things up with the betrayers. Ling Lan got into the hover car arranged by Ling Yu, and Ling Yu got in after her, and then started reporting on the investigation results they had gathered in the course of the afternoon. It turned out that Ling Hua had betrayed the Ling family because he didn't want his child to follow in his footsteps to become a Ling family loyalist for the next generation. Ling Hua's son, Ling Yi, was younger than Ling Lan by 1 year. At his birth, he was assessed to be just a hair weaker than Ling Lan in terms of fitness and potential. In other words, Ling Yi had a very high probability of becoming an ace operator. However, the offspring of Ling family loyalists had no right to enroll and study in a scout academy. They could only accept the in-house education organized by the Ling family. This meant that Ling Yi's growth would be stunted. He would never be able to pilot a mecha better than the standard mecha, and his chances of being promoted to an ace operator were pretty much nil. As Ling Yi grew closer and closer to turning 6, Ling Hua had been tormented by his internal struggle. It was then that a chance for his son to excel beyond his station had appeared before him, and so Ling Hua's loyalty had wavered. The other party had promised that as long as Ling Lan died, the Ling family would be dissolved. Then, Ling Hua's family could become regular citizens again, and Ling Yi would be able to formally enroll and study at a scout academy, obtaining a bright and limitless future. After listening to Ling Yu's report, Ling Lan sighed regretfully. "How stupid," Ling Yu said dazedly. Yes, the captain was really so stupid. If only he had told us about this, he could have used the information to gain enough merit to request for his freedom. Ling Yu still remembered that there was one rule among the Ling family rules. Any loyalist who performed exceptionally meritorious services could request one thing of the family head that was within the head's means. As long as Ling Hua had related the plan against Ling Lan to Chamberlain Lincoln, it would have counted as an exceptionally meritorious service, and he would have been able to put forward his request. Ling Lan and Chamberlain Lincoln would never have refused him. Till this point, Ling Lan and Ling Yu just couldn't understand why Ling Hua had been willing to walk down this dark path, finally choosing to betray the Ling family rather than use this information as a bargaining chip. However, once Ling Lan returned to the living room of the Ling family main estate, the waiting Lincoln told her the rest of the information he had just discovered, which included the other reason behind Ling Hua's betrayal. With a serious expression, Lincoln said, "According to those 3 loyalists, during a fit of boasting, Ling Hua revealed that the other party had promised to provide his son with 6 tubes of gene-stimulating agent every year until Ling Yi could absorb no more. Of course, he had also promised the other 3 loyalists that their descendants would also be able to enjoy this privilege if their stats were good enough. The other party is certainly generous. Looks like this person who's after me is someone powerful." Ling Lan finally understood why Ling Hua had chosen to betray them in the end. Even though the offer seemed to be just 6 tubes of gene agent, it had given Ling Hua a sense of how powerful the other side really was, implying that crushing the Ling family was not too difficult for them. Ling Hua was frightened. He felt that the Ling family would not be able to go up against that person. He didn't want his child to be buried along with the Ling family. Lincoln naturally understood Ling Hua's mentality as well, and sighed sadly once again. "Young Master Lan, what do you plan to do with Ling Hua's wife and child?" asked Lincoln carefully. There wasn't a single family which would accept the orphan of a traitor. Many families would choose to eliminate the problem entirely by getting rid of them as soon as possible. Just as Ling Lan was about to answer, a commotion broke out at the main gates. A child could be heard crying, "Young Master Lan, young Master Lan, I beg you, please see me." From the sofa, Ling Lan corked a brow, lifting her head to look at Lincoln. As such, she saw when a hint of awkwardness flashed past Lincoln's face. It looked like he knew who the child screaming outside was. Ling Lan did not ask any questions. She just stood and walked to the gate, with Lincoln and Ling Yu following close behind her. The moment Ling Lan arrived at the gate, she saw a little midget just a little smaller than her struggling within the grasp of one of the guards. He was still screaming for young Master Lan, and when he saw her appear, His eyes lit up with a savage joy. "Who are you? Why do you want to see me?" Ling Lan asked impassively. "So you're young Master Lan?" At Ling Lan's words, the little midget struggled even harder. Ling Yu, who was standing behind Ling Lan, threw a pointed look at the guard holding on to the child, and the guard immediately loosened his grip and retreated to the side. "I'm called Ling Yi. My dad's Ling Hua." The midget straightened up and introduced himself after calming himself for a moment. Ling Lan nodded internally. No wonder Ling Hua was willing to become a traitor for his son. The child was indeed very bright, and could already control his emotions well enough to grasp opportunities in his path. "They told me that my dad is dead. My dad was so strong, how could he die?" There was still hope on Ling Yi's face, as if hoping that Ling Lan would tell him that all this wasn't true. Ling Lan secretly sighed. Ling Hua may have wronged her, but he hadn't wronged his son Ling Yi. A thought tumbled through her mind, and she replied, "Even the strongest person cannot always fend off an enemy's underhanded schemes." "Ling Yi, your father is really dead. Who killed my father?" Ling Yi's eyes were clouded with despair. "I do not know, but we're guessing that the orders came from someone in the upper ranks of the military, and that my father was also killed by one of the opponent's plots," said Ling Lan sadly and regretfully. Ling Lan resolutely pushed the blame of Ling Hua's death onto the enemy who wanted her dead. She looked forward to Ling Yi's vengeance against the other once he grew up. After all, even though Ling Hua had died at her hands, wasn't the root cause the other party's inducement? Of course. Ling Lan's words caused a flash of surprise to pass through both Ling Yin's and Ling Yu's eyes, but their expressions quickly relaxed, as if pleased with the way Ling Lan had spun things. Gaining the answer he sought, the flames of hatred blazed in Ling Yi's eyes. "Young Master Lan, I'll definitely become stronger. At that time, I hope young Master Lan will give me the chance to end the enemy with my own hand." Ling Yi's words caused an irrepressible shudder to run through Ling Yin's and Ling Yu's body. A chill settled in their hearts. Could this end up being a case of warming a snake in one's bosom? Only Ling Lan seemed unperturbed, as she nodded and said, "All right, I promise you this. Also, I must tell you, when your father sacrificed himself, he requested that you be set free, and I've agreed to it." But Ling Yi interrupted Ling Lan to say, "I don't want to leave the Ling family." "Why?" Ling Lan was curious. "I want to inherit my father's position. I want to become young Master Lan's most trusted loyalist." Ling Yi's face was filled with determination. Ever since he was little, he had received education telling him to be loyal to the Ling family and the family head. The thought of leaving the Ling family had never crossed his young mind. This response caused Ling Lan to fall silent. "Ling Hua, you betrayed yourself, and betrayed the Ling family. But your child had no intentions to leave the Ling family to begin with. Wasn't that just ironic?" "I really want to agree with your request, but unfortunately, I promised your father first." "A person should not go back on their word," said Ling Lan regretfully. Ling Lan's words made Ling Yi burst out into tears instantly. After all, he was only just a 5-year-old child, facing an unknown future. Even the strongest and brightest child would not be able to bear the anxiety within his heart. Like the child he was, he wailed. "Ling Yi, if you want to inherit your father's position, then you can't cry anymore." With reddened eyes, Ling Lan comforted the boy. "Your father wished for you to enter a scout academy, and then obtain a place in a military school, and finally become a professional military man. You cannot let your father down." Then, Ling Lan patted him on the head and continued, "However, I didn't say anything about sending you away. You will still be a member of the Ling family, only a free man in name. When you've grown up, it'll be up to you whether you want to leave or return to the Ling family." Ling Lan's words reignited the hope in Ling Yi's heart. He wiped away his tears, and said, "Yes, I'll work hard. Young Master Lan, I'll definitely come back." He said this with steel-like conviction. He then turned around with a serious look on his face to speak to Ling Yu, who was behind Ling Lan. "Brother-in-law Yu, I'll leave young Master Lan to you for now. Once I've become stronger, I'll definitely come back to take your position from you." That said, he bowed to Ling Lan in farewell and left the Ling family main estate. With a face full of worry, Ling Yu asked. Young Master Lan, isn't his arrangement too risky? If Ling Yi ever found out the truth, it was very likely that he would turn against them instead. Ling Lan smiled a slight smile. Isn't it more interesting this way? Whether or not Ling Yi becomes useful to me in the end, he is still a good chess piece. Ling Lan's words rendered Ling Yu speechless. He really couldn't figure out what Ling Lan's true thoughts were now. Lincoln's expression was a little unsettled, but in the end, he said nothing. Ling Lan turned her head to face Lincoln with a harsh expression. Grandpa Chamberlain, you've already handled the traitors and those prisoners, right? Lincoln's heart skipped a beat, and he stared at Ling Lan intently. Ling Lan asked, about Ling Hua's betrayal. Besides the three of us, who else knows? Ling Yu hurriedly shook his head. Out of caution in case there were other traitors within the Ling family, the three traitorous Mecha Squad members had been interrogated personally by him and Lincoln. No one else knew any details. Lincoln's verbal response corroborated this. After Ling Yu had left, he had continued the interrogation on his own, which was how he had found out the key reason behind Ling Hua's betrayal. That's good. After getting rid of those people, as long as the three of us keep our mouths shut, Ling Yi should never be able to find out the truth. Ling Lan's words sent cold sweat running down Lincoln's and Ling Yu's back. Was this Ling Lan's subtle way of warning them? What if the person who tried to buy Ling Hua comes out to tell Ling Yi the truth? Lincoln was still uneasy about this. Ling Yi was clearly a ticking time bomb. Perhaps then we can inculcate the idea in Ling Yi that all of it is a plot by the opponent. Anyway, it's a bigger problem if he doesn't reveal himself. If he comes out, we could then follow the vine to get the melon too, and find out once and for all who is trying to harm our Ling family. Ling Lan's expression was sly. Lincoln's eyes lit up. This is a good plan. If Ling Yi really managed to draw out that venomous snake from the shadows, it was worth it to take the risk. Just like that, the three of them discussed things a little more, and then Lincoln and Ling Yu went off to handle their respective matters. Meanwhile, Ling Lan was left sitting alone on the sofa of the large living room. Once she confirmed that the two men had left, she sighed softly. To save Ling Yi, was it really necessary to make things so complicated? On the surface, Lincoln and Ling Yu had seemed as if they really wanted to tear the weed out by its root. But in truth, everything they did was to salvage Ling Yi's life. Otherwise, how could the little Ling Yi suddenly appear at the main door of the Ling family main house? The loyalists protecting the main house must have received the order to let Ling Yi through to the main doors, and both Lincoln and Ling Yu should have something to do with this order. The moment Ling Lan saw Ling Yi, she had understood this immediately. Although Ling Lan had no intention of taking Ling Yi's life to begin with, this sort of intentional arrangement annoyed her. It was great that the Ling family rules were humane and reasonable, however, they weren't ideal for warding against insubordination. In times when the family head was weak while the servants were stronger, this type of subtle nudging without the master's express permission was likely to happen. Although they didn't mean any harm, and there was no negative impact on her currently, if she let this go on unchecked, it might end up causing her a lot of trouble someday. Perhaps she should think of a way to change the current status quo, otherwise, it may really become impossible for her to continue putting her trust in the Ling family people. And that would truly be a tragic thing, both for Ling Lan, and for Lincoln and the rest. Translator's thoughts. Ruxinji, Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you for all your support thus far. It means a lot. I'm not a super fast translator, but I can give you all some extra chapters for this holiday season. Holiday Speed Burst. Besides this one, there'll be another extra chapter tomorrow as well. Happy Holidays. Chapter 63, Number 5 appears. Walking out from the Ling family main house, Ling Yu finally couldn't contain himself any longer, and asked Lincoln in front of him, Elder Kin, why didn't you ask about the cockpits ejecting from the mecha? Ling Yu knew that must have been caused by Ling Lan somehow, otherwise he wouldn't have been so calm when the mecha had fired. It's just, he really couldn't figure out how Ling Lan had done it. Could it really be that he could control AI? Of course, Ling Yu knew that this was preposterous, a joke. Everyone knew that AIs were self-contained systems. If a hacker was crazy enough to try and control an AI, the AI would shut down automatically, and the mecha would automatically switch over to manual controls. Even the most skillful hacker in the world would not be able to succeed. Moreover, once the AI had shut down, the controls would still be in the hands of the operators in the cockpits. It couldn't be that all three operators had made the same control error, right? Of course, another possibility was the AI itself glitching. Ling Yu naturally shied away from this avenue of thought. If that were true, it would certainly be a catastrophe of epic proportions. It would utterly destroy the entire weapons system of the Federation. The Federation just could not afford for this to be true. In front of him, Lincoln paused for a moment before turning his head back to caution. Ling Yu, you overstep. Ling Yu's heart skipped a beat. Every generation of the Ling family had his own trump card and last resort, and these were considered forbidden territory within the Ling family. No one was allowed to look into it, and violators of this unspoken rule would receive a bloody end. And here he had stumbled across the line unknowingly. Yes, thank you, Elder Qin, for the reminder. At this point, Ling Yu no longer held a whit of curiosity about it. Perhaps this was just one of the Ling family's last resorts. It made sense when one thought about it. Mecha were the ultimate solo weapon. Even the common standard mecha could easily wipe out a bare-handed martial expert. If he didn't keep something up his sleeve, how could the Ling family head put mecha into others' hands without worry? It had to be said that Ling Yu had an overactive imagination, his brain easily coming up with all sorts of wild ideas to fill in the blanks. The result of his reasoning was a back drenched with cold sweat, and the already loyal Ling Yu had no more stray thoughts, becoming Ling Lan's most loyal loyalist in his lifetime. Lincoln observed Ling Yu's realization and acceptance, and smiled a satisfied smile. Lincoln was a good elder, and a good guard, but he was not a good steward. If he hadn't been so lax in his management all these years, the people of the Ling family wouldn't have been so uncertain about their own position within the household, resulting in that tragic betrayal. However, Lincoln was a person who knew how to reflect. Since he had made a mistake previously, then he would change now. So he had deviated from his usual agreeableness into this stern demeanor, and had issued an immediate warning in the face of Ling Yu's curiosity. If this was before, Lincoln would have patiently explained things to Ling Yu before counseling Ling Yu to drop the matter. He wouldn't have outright warned Ling Yu without providing an explanation. It looked like Ling Lan wasn't the only one who had sensed the problem within the Ling family. Lincoln had sensed it too and had begun his attempts to correct it. As for whether it would be effective, only time would tell. Of course, Lincoln may have been affecting an enigmatic look as he warned Ling Yu, but in reality, he himself had no clue how the cockpits had been automatically ejected from the three mecha. Back then, his first thought was indeed that this was a last resort of the Ling family. He still recalled that when Ling Zhao had left, he had said something carefully and intently by Lan Luofeng's ear. Perhaps even then, Master Ling Zhao had sensed the problem within the Ling family, and for precaution's sake, had passed the secret of this last resort on to Lan Luofeng. Grandpa Chamberlain, you're really thinking too much. The man just wanted to say some sweet nothings to his beau and was embarrassed to be overheard, and later, Lan Luofeng must have passed it on in turn to Ling Lan. It should be noted that Chamberlain Lincoln's ability to fill in the blanks was certainly a match for Ling Yu's. Initially, Ling Lan had still been worried about how she would explain this issue away, but now, because of these two's misunderstandings, it was no longer a problem. Mind you, as Ling Lan had been discussing the matter of Ling Yi earlier, she had been constantly worried that they would ask about that. Of course, she had already come up with a strategy to handle it, but unexpectedly, the dreaded question hadn't come even when they had left. This made Ling Lan very thankful, and she could finally relax. Since everyone was willing to pretend, she was also happy to play along. Still, Ling Lan wasn't happy for long before she was mercilessly dragged into the learning space. That night, under Lan Luofeng's praise, Ling Lan had played up her cuteness to the max and feasted until she was full. Just as she was humming and preparing to lie down to rest, she felt her consciousness being sucked out of her body by a terrifying force. FCK. Not again. Ling Lan savagely raised her middle finger against the dark world before her, mentally cursing at the tyranny of the learning space, and at how it didn't know how to respect its own host. Of course, Ling Lan only dared to be so impudent now. Once instructor number 1 showed up, Ling Lan would be as obedient as she could be. It couldn't be helped. Number 1 was just too scary. Ling Lan's strength was improving little by little, and the more it improved, the more she could sense how overwhelming instructor number 1's strength was. With just one look, he could render her immobile. As expected, the somber coffin-faced instructor number 1 appeared, and Ling Lan immediately hid away her indignant expression, lowering her head and smoothing her brows into a face eager to learn. "Today's ambush, what are your thoughts?" asked number 1 directly. In front of Mecha, the ultimate solo weapon, pure physical strength is nothing. Like an ant, Ling Lan would never forget the helplessness she had felt when facing the mecha. If it hadn't been for Little Four's help, she would have been done for. For the present it's already not bad that you could comprehend that. Number 1 didn't seem particularly satisfied with Ling Lan's response, but he wasn't angered by it either. He continued, "Based on your current performance and condition, I have to adjust your training plan." Ling Lan was taken aback. She had no idea what instructor number 1 meant. Number 5. Number 1 spoke once again, but called out an unfamiliar number. "Big bro, I'm here." A vaguely lazy voice rang out from behind Ling Lan. Ling Lan abruptly turned her head, and saw a rather dashing-looking young man with a smile on his lips. When his eyes met hers, he waved at her enthusiastically. Facing number 1's stifling presence, he seemed entirely unconcerned. Ling Lan's gaze narrowed. This man was definitely more than he seemed. She knew very well how formidable as usual instructor number 1's presence was. The fact that this man could be so carefree in the face of that. Did it mean that his presence was just as formidable? "After this, your training will be led by number 5, with number 9 assisting." Number 1 didn't seem to mind number 5's flippant attitude, disappearing after laying down the law. Meanwhile, number 9 had also appeared in the learning space. When she saw number 5, the subtle smile on her face faded into ice. "Number 5, long time no see." "Lil sis number 9, it's been such a long time. Your brother here has almost contracted lovesickness since it's been so long." My hair turning white overnight and all. Number 5 scurried over to number 9, face filled with emotion as he clasped number 9's hand. His expression was full of longing, completely oblivious of the throbbing green vein on number 9's forehead. Faced with number 5's shameless words and actions, number 9 threw a kick at him without any hesitation. With just a single leap, number 5 escaped the range of number 9's attack, but he still showed no restraint, continuing to tease. "Lil sis number 9, so passionate even after so long. You make elder brother so happy." "Number 5, do not forget your mission." "Number 1 isn't as patient as I am," huffed number 9 coldly. She seemed used to number 5's lackadaisical attitude, bluntly reminding him not to go overboard. When number 5 heard this, his grin visibly froze for a beat. Number 9 didn't pay any more attention to number 5, turning instead to Ling Lan to say, "Ling Lan, number 5's training will not be easy, you must be prepared." Facing her pet disciple, she couldn't help but worry a bit more than usual. She understood that number 1 wouldn't allow her to be the only one responsible for Ling Lan's training this time because he was afraid that her affection for Ling Lan would affect her progress. Although number 1 seemed to be very dissatisfied with Ling Lan, nitpicking at any little flaw, number 1 actually thought very highly of Ling Lan, even training her up as if she were his successor. Otherwise, number 1 wouldn't have modified his training plan for Ling Lan again and again. Hearing this, number 5's smile deepened once again. "Number 9, relax. Ling Lan's also my student. I'll take good care of him." For some reason, looking at number 5's smile, Ling Lan felt a chill settle over her heart. Ling Lan's intuition was not mistaken. When number 9 heard number 5's words, she did not relax at all, but rather looked at Ling Lan with strange pity in her eyes. This gaze set off the final alarms in Ling Lan's mind. Hells, this was definitely nothing good. Before Ling Lan could ask number 9 any questions, number 5 flicked a finger, and Ling Lan was thrown into a new learning area, an endless grassy plain. With a tortured look on her face, Ling Lan heard the voice of the system ring out by her ear. Mission: 1 minute later, a wolf pack will come. Please hold out against the wolf pack's attack for 20 minutes without dying. Reward for completion unknown. Punishment for failure unknown. Ling Lan had no thought to spare right now for reward or punishment. Her forehead was beaded with sweat. God damn it. Actually expecting her to fight barehanded against wolves, and she had to hold out for 20 minutes as well. This was definitely a mission meant to kill someone. Ling Lan did not believe that the wolves in this wolf pack here would be like the wolves from her previous planet. The wild beasts within the learning space were definitely several times bigger and stronger than their earthly counterparts. It wasn't that Ling Lan had not considered running away, but unfortunately she had no idea which direction the wolf pack would come from, or even if they would attack from all directions. Since she couldn't be sure, recklessly running away might just put her in a worse situation. She might as well just save her strength and wait for the final battle. Ling Lan naturally used the last of her waiting time to observe her grassy surroundings. If she could just find an easily defensible location, then setting aside 20 minutes, she should even be able to defend for a fair bit longer. Unfortunately, Ling Lan was disappointed. The learning space was not like the games of her previous world, full of bugs. In this grassland before her, there wasn't a single obstruction in sight. The endless flat plain of grass only followed by yet endless flat plain of grass. And on the ground itself, there was only soft grass on top of loose soil. There weren't even any hard rocks, so Ling Lan couldn't even find one to use as a weapon even if she wanted to. Damn it, the learning space was truly vicious. It wouldn't allow Ling Lan to borrow any external strength whatsoever, determined to make Ling Lan fight off the wolves with just her bare hands. A minute's time went by swiftly, and then countless howls broke the silence from all around Ling Lan. Sure enough, the wolves were not going to come from just one direction, but were surrounding her. For Ling Lan, this just made the situation even more perilous. Ling Lan narrowed her eyes and released the malevolent aura contained within her body in a sudden blast. The moment this malevolent aura appeared, a change fell over the wolves' howls. Chapter 64, The Rabbit Sky Leap Skill. Against a wolf pack, showing any weakness was not going to work. A wolf pack wouldn't think as deeply as a human would. In their eyes, the weaker the prey, the easier it would be for them to release their aggression upon it. In contrast, against the stronger opponent, a wolf pack would be much more cautious, and wouldn't just pounce recklessly. Sure enough, the full blast of Ling Lan's malevolent aura made the alpha wolf pause. After all, Ling Lan was someone who had killed the king of the swamp before and had been baptized in the blood of the various kingly beasts. This malevolent aura caused the wolves to become wary, and the wolves who had been bounding at her from all directions stopped at the lead wolf's howling cries. Still, they remained poised to attack, just waiting for the alpha wolf's signal. The dense pack of wolves almost filled the entire grassy plain, and every wolf was extremely large and fierce, their bodies as big as a small cow's. Their snouts were spread in savage grins, and drool hung from the razor-sharp tips of their exposed teeth. Facing such delicious prey, the eyes of this pack of ravenous wolves were almost glowing green. If a normal person was here and was faced with this scene, he would likely piss his pants and collapse to the ground. Still, Ling Lan was unaffected. She remained cool-headed and continued to look for her chance. At this moment, she was very grateful that she had gone through the survival training in the primordial forest. After experiencing the terror of surviving there, she could keep her calm in this situation. Heart steady and muscles pliant. Both sides observed each other for a long moment, and then, the alpha wolf's howl rang out once again. Ling Lan's ears twitched, sifting through the cries coming from the wolf pack, and she managed to confirm that there were actually 5 alpha wolves of equal rank within the pack. Pleasant surprise flashed through Ling Lan's eyes. Perhaps this was the fighting chance she had to hold out for 20 minutes. Without waiting for the 5 alpha wolves to come to an agreement, Ling Lan charged forward, her target being the area to the northeast side. Different from the other wolves in the wolf pack, The wolves in this area had a clear red line on their foreheads. Ling Lan's unexpected action caused chaos to break out within the pack surrounding her, but a piercing howl rang out, followed closely by the cries of the 4 other alpha wolves, bringing the pack back to order and silence. Only the wolves with red-lined foreheads continued to bare their fangs at Ling Lan, who had invaded their territory. It looked like the alpha wolf of this part of the pack felt that this was a direct challenge to its authority, and that Ling Lan was a prey that had delivered itself to death's door. Although Ling Lan's fists flew furiously, savagely sending red-lined wolf after red-lined wolf flying, she was still keeping a close watch on the whole situation. Seeing the other wolf packs under the other alpha wolves sitting by the sidelines as she had expected, her heart settled. Of course, Ling Lan didn't think the danger was over yet. If the red-lined wolf pack couldn't handle her, the alpha of this pack would probably compromise in the end and choose to cooperate with the other wolf packs. At that time, she would still be subject to a group attack. Frankly, although the wolves had looked as if they worked together like a single entity at first, they were still divided by their respective packs. Cooperating to take down a prey was fine, but if one pack wanted to enter another pack's territory, that was definitely out of the question. Unless the particular wolf pack was weaker and needed the reinforcement of outside help, only then would the alpha wolf loosen this restriction. Ling Lan had cleverly grasped hold of this point and had jumped on her own into the red-line wolves' territory, forcing the other wolf packs to step back and wait. Ling Lan may be small, but the power behind her fists wasn't, and her physical fitness was certainly of the abnormal sort. After 6 years of continuous training with the qi cultivation exercises, along with the medicinal baths of the Ling family, her body's resilience had long since exceeded that of an average person's. Although her skin still looked as fair and rosy as a maiden's, it was very difficult for normal blades to leave any sort of mark on her body. Somewhere high up in the air out of Ling Lan's sight, Number 5 and Number 9 were watching the fight. Number 5 nodded and said, "Not bad, she has good basics." Number 9, "Looks like you put in a lot of effort." Number 9's eyes held a trace of a smile, and her tone was proud as she said, "Yes, Ling Lan is very hardworking and motivated." Number 5 glanced at Number 9 with a half-smile on his face. "You're satisfied with her current progress? It doesn't seem like she's reached her limits yet." Number 9, "You've become soft on her after all." "That's not like you." Number 9 sniffed. "I think this level of progress is best suited for her." However, after she said this, a subtle blush stole over the skin behind Number 9's ears. It couldn't be helped. Number 9 couldn't really say that with full honesty. It was the truth that she hadn't pushed Ling Lan as hard as she could in the past few years. Mind you, the teaching approach of the learning space was to use the most extreme and cruelest methods imaginable to force the children to break past their limits and unleash their innate talents. It made the children challenge their limits in every way, physically and mentally, and even in other respects. This sort of cruel teaching approach put every single child who entered the learning space under an endless amount of torment and duress. Almost all the children had not been able to bear it, and would end up either breaking down in tears, running away in fear, or even losing all their confidence to loudly beg for mercy. This was all part of the phase of vulnerability that the children had to experience and overcome. But Ling Lan stood out as an oddball. It was as if she had already established her goals early on. The girl was a proper adult who had lived 2 lives, not an ignorant young child. Of course she wouldn't be so easily scared off by this type of teaching approach. So, in the 6 years with Number 9 in charge, no matter how harsh the training, or how unreasonable the courses, Ling Lan had endured. She had never voiced a single complaint, nor shed a single tear. This stoicism ended up moving the typically unfeeling Number 9, leading her to become somewhat soft on Ling Lan. It had to be said that this was a beautiful misunderstanding. Number 5 touched his chin with his right hand, and the smile on his lips deepened. Perhaps this was why Number 1 had unsealed him. This child had actually managed to affect Number 9. How interesting. Seeing Number 5's strange smile, Number 9 couldn't help but worry for Ling Lan. She raised her voice in warning. "Number 5, don't go overboard." Number 9 knew how insane Number 5 could get. At the beginning, countless promising prodigies had had their wings snapped by his hand. Of course, anyone who managed to survive his training would certainly become an unimaginable talent. But she had never seen Number 5 succeed in training anyone. Number 9 looked over at Ling Lan with a complicated gaze. It's not that she didn't want Ling Lan to become great, but rather than subject her to the unspeakable torments of the training period, she'd rather see Ling Lan happy and carefree. But could a powerless person truly be happy and carefree? As if coming to some realization, Number 9 abruptly turned away, and with her back to Number 5, she said, "Once you're done with training, come find me." Number 5 quirked a brow. "What, not going to follow us around anymore? Aren't you afraid I'll end up ruining your beloved disciple?" After all, the reason they had come here was due to Number 9's worry to begin with. At this moment, Number 9's face no longer held any traces of worry. With a cool expression, she said, "Number 1 did the right thing. I am not suitable to be Ling Lan's main instructor right now, but I believe that Ling Lan will definitely complete your training course." So much confidence in her? Number 5 was taken aback. For context, it should be known that he had ruined several hundred prodigies with his training methods previously, which was why he had been sealed within the learning space. Thus, he himself was very surprised when he was unsealed this time, and even more surprisingly, Number 1 had actually put him in charge of their current host. "Ling Lan's not just my pet disciple, she's also elder brother Number 1's." A confident smile appeared on Number 9's lips before she disappeared from the area. Number 5 stared at the spot where Number 9 disappeared and smiled thoughtfully. Number 1's disciple? That was just too interesting. Meanwhile, around Ling Lan, the bodies of red-lined wolves were beginning to pile up, and although yet more red-lined wolves continued to circle her, their attacks were not as aggressive as they had been before, and were perhaps even a little tentative. This scenario enraged the alpha wolf of the red-lined wolves. It felt that its authority had been undermined by this weak little prey before it, so it let loose another howl, spurring on the attacks of the red-lined wolves, causing them to become more aggressive. Bam! A red-lined wolf who was lunging for Ling Lan's throat was punched right in the head. Crack! Its skull fractured, and its calf-sized body fell heavily to the ground. And there the red-lined wolf lay, whining piteously, and after a few final fluttering breaths, its chest went still and the wolf never got up again. The current Ling Lan was no longer her usual serene self. Her eyes held a limitless amount of killing intent, and she attacked with precision and ruthlessness. This sort of life-and-death scenario did not allow for any carelessness on her part. She was determined not to experience death being torn apart by wolves. She had already begun circulating her chi the moment she started attacking, as this was one of her trump cards when charging into the wolf pack. As long as the opponent was not stronger than her, the energy expended in her attacks could be completely recuperated by the circulation of chi. In other words, Ling Lan would never be in danger of a tragic death by exhaustion. The alpha of the red-lined wolves watched as its subordinates fell one by one, with no visible effect on the weak prey. Finally, it could tolerate it no longer, and with a howl, it rushed into the fray. The alpha of the red-lined wolves was much bigger than the other red-lined wolves. Its body could be compared to that of an adult bull. It approached with bloodshot red eyes. The countless deaths of its subordinates by Ling Lan's hands had sent it into a towering rage. The other red-lined wolves backed away in the face of their alpha, leaving the battlefield completely up to their leader. Ling Lan exhaled softly. Plans and counterplans flashed through her mind as she considered whether she should try to draw out the fight with this alpha wolf, so she could while away a bit more time. But the red-lined alpha wolf was not going to give Ling Lan the time to think, pouncing at her the moment it got within range. It swung its thick claws at Ling Lan, trying to tear this detestable prey in half. Ling Lan leant back slightly, just enough to avoid the alpha's claws, when suddenly, the wolf's claws mysteriously lengthened. Ling Lan's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly pushed on her 2 feet to spring back further, narrowly managing to avoid those sharp extendable claws. After evading the attack, Ling Lan struggled to regain her balance as she peeked at the alpha's claws. All four of the alpha's claws had extended by approximately 10 centimeters. Who knew that the red-lined alpha wolf within the learning space would have the ability to retract its claws? This surprise had almost made her take some unintended damage. The alpha wolf wasn't going to give Ling Lan time to adjust, immediately lunging at her once again, and its main weapon this time was its sharp teeth. Ling Lan met it with a fist, but this time she felt as if she was hitting a solid rock. Her fist throbbed in pain, and the resulting aftershock of energy pushed her back by 5 to 6 paces. On the other hand, Ling Lan's punch didn't seem to have caused much damage to the alpha. The alpha landed squarely, and when it saw Ling Lan falling back, it charged forward once again with all its might, jaws wide open in preparation for a savage bite. Rabbit Sky Leap, Chapter 65. A ripoff of a mission clear reward. Ling Lan's right arm was numb, so she could no longer use it to attack, so she decisively threw out a back kick, using the technique she had trained diligently to obtain in the past 5 years, the Rabbit Sky Leap. And now she would finally be able to test it out for real, and see how much power this skill, which had cost her 10 honor points, truly wielded. With a loud bam, the red-lined alpha wolf was sent flying amidst its own pained cries. It smashed onto the ground and actually rolled another 5 to 6 meters due to the remaining energy behind the blow before coming to a stop. Ling Lan put down her right foot, her eyes full of satisfaction. As expected, the Rabbit Sky Leap was really powerful. The strength of her own fists had not been able to do much damage to the red-lined alpha wolf, but the Rabbit Sky Leap could, and it looked like the damage value it dealt was significant. According to Ling Lan's calculations, the Rabbit Sky Leap technique could increase her leg strength by as much as 5 times, and this was just at the basic level of mastery. If she continued to practice and became even more proficient with the skill, it would definitely become one of her killing techniques. At this moment, the red-lined wolf tottered upright again. As its head was hit directly, it seemed to still be somewhat dazed. The red-lined alpha wolf shook its head to try and dispel the dizziness, but this move only made it fall over again. The condition of the red-lined alpha wolf caused the red-lined wolf pack to fall into disarray. The wolves were all howling at the sky worriedly, as if asking if their leader was okay. Still, as befitting one of the reigning kings of the grasslands, the red-lined alpha wolf stood up once again. This time, it seemed to have regained full awareness, and turning to face the one who had kicked it, its eyes were crimson, filled with the need to rip Ling Lan into pieces. Still, the wild beasts within the learning space had a certain level of intelligence. Ling Lan's kick had shown the alpha wolf that this small prey before it was not as weak as it seemed. It knew that it would not be able to handle the prey on its own, and so the red-lined wolf cast away its dignity, and howled up at the sky. Very quickly, the wolves all around took up the howl as well, and the wolf packs in all directions bowed down collectively. From different directions and from different wolf packs, 4 huge alpha wolves emerged. They were like kings, strolling out proudly from among their subjects, slowly approaching Ling Lan. Apparently, the red-lined alpha wolf had called out for assistance from the other alpha wolves. Ling Lan's expression turned frigid. Although she didn't have to continue duking it out with the sea of wolves, the combined attack of 5 alpha wolves was also nothing to sneeze at. She really feared that she might lose her life under the fangs and claws of these alpha wolves as soon as the fight began. Interesting. Didn't expect her to have that skill. Number 5's eyes narrowed in contemplation, a complicated expression on his face as he watched Ling Lan preparing to do battle against the 5 alpha wolves. Had that skill been her own choice, or had it been just luck? At that moment, the 5 alpha wolves officially began their attack on Ling Lan. With the red-lined alpha wolf as the lead attacker, the other alpha wolves circled around, darting in every so often to try and score a sneak attack. Their movements were well coordinated, nothing at all like the messy and chaotic attacks of the regular wolves of the wolf pack. The attacks of the alpha wolves had a sort of beauty to it. Unlike the crude savagery of the regular wolves' attacks, the alpha wolves' movements could even be called graceful. though sometimes strange and elusive. But every collaboration between the wolves was just right, causing Ling Lan to be extremely harried as she evaded, almost dying several times in the process. Ling Lan no longer held anything back. She pushed Qi into her two arms, instantly doubling their strength. Although it couldn't compare to the power of the rabbit sky leap, it was still more than enough to penetrate through the alpha wolves' thick hides and deal them some pain. Right now, Ling Lan's own body strength was not enough to fight against these alpha wolves. Ling Lan had already become aware of this during her first battle with the red-lined alpha wolf. The perfectly coordinated attacks of the 5 alpha wolves gave them the upper edge. But Ling Lan wasn't helpless under these attacks. The powerful rabbit sky leap was something the 5 alpha wolves had to watch out for because they just couldn't tell which kick was actually a rabbit sky leap in disguise. Under this scenario, the two sides were actually pretty evenly matched. Still, the fearsome attacks of the alpha wolves let Ling Lan experience the thrill of dancing with death. She slowly let herself go, subconsciously descending into a pure world of combat, not a single stray thought within her mind. After fighting for a long while, Ling Lan felt a rush of euphoria permeate through her body. The shackles holding her back had finally been broken. Ling Lan felt as if she had entered a whole new world, where the energy within her body was cheerfully waving at her, as if announcing their return. Ling Lan knew what this was. It was the shackle she had put on herself previously to control her own strength. Within the past month, Ling Lan had been embroiled in combat training with the Ling family loyalists, all for the sake of restraining her malevolent aura. Even so, Ling Lan was very afraid that her malevolent aura would suddenly burst out, causing her to lose control and harm her family by accident. And so she had cautiously convinced herself that no matter what the situation, she would not permit herself to release all of her strength in its entirety. Gradually, this self-hypnosis of sorts became a type of shackle, until finally, Ling Lan found that even if she consciously wanted to, she was unable to unleash all of her strength. Ling Lan didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this result. Later on, she had sparred with Qi Long, and although she should have been able to defeat Qi Long with a straightforward show of strength, she had found it impossible to bypass her own personal limiters. In the end, she could only keep dragging out the fight until Qi Long had been exhausted for the spar to end. Naturally, faced with such a frustrating situation, Ling Lan was very unhappy. But unfortunately, she had been unable to resolve the problem, and so had had no choice but to push it to the back of her mind, and wait for a solution to present itself later. Unexpectedly, at this crucial life-or-death moment, Ling Lan had broken past her shackles, regaining full access to her strength. The alpha wolves sensed this change in Ling Lan. Slowly but surely, they sensed the strength of their opponent grow stronger and stronger. Attacks which had only caused minor pain previously, were now actually hurting them to their bones. Ling Lan didn't know how long she had been fighting the alpha wolves, but she was starting to feel that her qi circulation could no longer keep up with her energy expenditure. Her stamina was gradually fading, seeming as if it would disappear entirely the very next moment. She should have been anxious and worried by this, but she was uncharacteristically calm, just as if she wasn't the Ling Lan fighting for her life right now, but rather a cold-eyed observer on the sidelines. Indeed, she had actually entered a strange sort of plane, where the attacks of the 5 alpha wolves seemed to occur almost in slow motion. She could actually see a hole in the collaborative attacks of the 5 alpha wolves, and sensed that if she targeted that spot, she would definitely manage to land a solid hit. Although Ling Lan didn't know why this was happening, she instinctively knew that this was a precious opportunity. Thus, she absorbed energy through her circulation of qi once more, sent it running down into her right fist, and then threw a firm punch at the hole she had noticed. Meanwhile, from number 5's perspective, Ling Lan's right fist vanished mysteriously all of a sudden, and then a loud smack rang out, and an alpha wolf was sent flying to sprawl on the ground a distance away. However, the alpha wolf wasn't heavily injured and managed to struggle back to its feet, and then with an angry howl, it rejoined the battle once more. At that moment, Number 5's face was a study in shock. Disbelievingly, he muttered to himself again and again, "How can this be? How can this be? Could it be the zone?" Even as the thought reared its head, he squashed it. He shook his head forcefully, telling himself to calm down, that what he was thinking was impossible. What child would be so aberrant as to touch on the borders of a zone at 6 years old? Perhaps it was just a lucky shot by Ling Lan. Seeing their own comrade being sent flying, albeit just briefly, the other alphas were enraged. This was an outright challenge. They no longer held any of their initial notions of fooling around, deciding to give the fight their all. Ling Lan still remained calm. She had once again noticed a hole in the defenses of the 5 alpha wolves. Even now she was unsure how her fist had connected with the head of one of the alpha wolves. The area she had aimed for had clearly been an empty space. Her last attack had been half-hearted, tentative, as she was only testing it out. But this time, she would no longer hesitate. Rabbit Sky Leap. Resolutely, Ling Lan used her strongest technique on the hole. Immediately after, a desolate cry rang out, and one of the alpha wolves was seen falling heavily to the ground. A large hole had been ripped open on its belly, and its blood was gushing out like a river. There was no possibility that it would survive. The Rabbit Sky Leap technique could really be used as a one-hit kill blow. Ling Lan was extremely pleased. Perhaps there were other skills and techniques much stronger than the Rabbit Sky Leap, but Ling Lan still felt that the Rabbit Sky Leap was much more useful and adaptable. Since the movements for it looked no different from a regular kick, she could hide it when she used it. No one would be able to tell which kick of hers was a Rabbit Sky Leap, so it was an extremely stealthy move. The wolf who died was the red-lined alpha wolf. All we can say is that the red-lined alpha wolf was just too unlucky, coming on so strongly because it thought it had the upper hand, only to lose its lupine life. At the death of the red-lined alpha wolf, the red-lined wolf pack started a round of mournful howling and then quickly dispersed. Within the span of 2 to 3 minutes, they had all fled the scene. The 4 remaining alpha wolves stared at each other for a moment, and then decided to follow the example of the red-lined wolf pack. They swiftly retreated, howling out to their subordinates as they did so. Ling Lan watched as the wolf pack slowly retreated until they had left her range of sight. Still, she didn't relax yet, staying on her feet for another 3 minutes. Finally, she could hold on no longer and toppled over to lie down on the ground. Those final 2 blows at the end had drained all of Ling Lan's physical energy. She had only remained standing out of sheer stubbornness, afraid to reveal her inability to continue to fight. Only when her body could really take it no longer had she given in to fall to the ground. If the wolf packs chose to return and rally a second attack on her right now, it would definitely be an easy task for them to make mincemeat out of Ling Lan. Fortunately though, the wolf packs had really departed, so Ling Lan managed to survive by the skin of her teeth. Even so, Ling Lan was still fearful as she recalled the situation. Once again, she was keenly aware of how important Little Four was to her. Without his comprehensive monitoring, her safety was entirely up to fate and circumstance. Ling Lan really detested this feeling of uncertainty. Of course, most importantly, it was rather lonely without Little Four by her side. However, Ling Lan's thoughts quickly turned to the sensation she had experienced in the earlier battle, that ability to glean the defensive holes of an opponent with one look, the feeling of having the flow of battle within her hands. That sensation was just wonderful. Ling Lan laid on the ground and held a fist up to the sky. Although she had no clue what that sensation was, she knew that it came from within her own body. In the fight, both her combat instincts and her physical strength had been pushed past her original limits, progressing one step further. Was this what was meant by a personal breakthrough? But before Ling Lan could get too caught up in her excitement, a wet blanket in human form appeared in her sight. Number 5 had materialized out of thin air right above Ling Lan. Peering down at Ling Lan, he grinned widely as he said, "Congratulations, you've cleared the mission." At the same time, the system's voice rang out by Ling Lan's ear, "Mission completed. Reward, intense training by Number 5 obtained." When Ling Lan heard the contents of the reward, her gut reaction was that she had been ripped off. If she had known that this was the reward for clearing the mission, she would definitely have committed suicide right off the bat, so that she would utterly fail the mission. Ling Lan had not forgotten Number 9's gentle warning. Boo-hoo-hoo. Could she have a redo? Ling Lan really felt like crying, full of regret for what might have been. However, Number 5 didn't give Ling Lan much time to regret her life choices. With another quick grab, he tossed Ling Lan into his own special training area. Chapter 66 still ended up a border. Somewhere on the planet of Doha, in a top-secret location, someone was reporting the results of their operation through a communicator. Sir, the people below have sent back the news. We have failed. What happened? The screen was pitch black, and the disguised voice that came through was cold and mechanical. There were way too many people protecting that brat, not just those opposing us, but even the Blades showed up. The Blades? Why are they involved? The other could not understand why the bladed forces would appear here and now. Sir, what should we do now? The caller's forehead was dripping with sweat. His superior was unforgiving of failure. He was deeply afraid that he would lose his head over this. Looks like the situation is a little complicated. The bladed forces' involvement was clearly a concern to the other. Ling Zhao's son. Perhaps they are using him as bait now. It can't be. The caller just could not believe it. Ling Zhao was the Federation's hero. How could they treat a hero's child so heartlessly? HMPH, for their own benefit, what wouldn't the people in power abandon? The other laughed coldly, tone mocking as he continued, if Ling Zhao were still alive, and found out that the country he defended with his life was using his only descendant as bait, putting him in danger, he would probably be filled with endless regret. As if finding his own words rather pointless, the mechanical voice regrouped and commanded sternly, forget going after Ling Zhao's son, using him as bait to draw us out in their dreams. Understood. The caller reflexively stood up to receive his orders. However, he was still worried, so he asked, Sir, that boy is the child of a God-class operator. According to the transmitted data, his potential is excellent. If he is like Ling Zhao, and grows up to be another God-class operator for the Federation, this will be very disadvantageous for our empire. Shouldn't we just take the risk and eliminate him? God-class operators were just too strong beyond belief, capable of deciding the ultimate outcome of a battle if they were present. The speaker of the mechanical voice picked up on the worried tone of his subordinate, and chided in dissatisfaction. Didn't you do research on the information regarding God-class operators? Over the last several hundred years, has the offspring of any God-class operator managed to achieve that pinnacle? Even ascending to the level of an ace operator has been difficult for them. Didn't the geneticists of our empire publicize their research thesis? When a particular bloodline has culminated in a God-class operator, that means that the energy potential within the genes of that bloodline has already peaked. This also means that all the energy potential of that bloodline has been consumed by the produced God-class operator, resulting in his descendants becoming more and more mediocre. Ling Zhao's descendants are done for. Otherwise, Ling Zhao's son Ling Lan wouldn't have failed to even make the top 10 of the Central Scout Academy. The decline of the Ling family was a foregone conclusion, so they weren't really worth their attention. This news dropped onto the caller's head like a bomb, sending his mind reeling. If Ling Zhao's son wasn't a real threat to the empire, then why had his superior spent so much effort trying to assassinate Ling Lan? As if sensing his subordinate's bewilderment, the mechanical voice rang out once more through the communicator. It has been almost 7 years since Ling Zhao's death, but all the military personnel of the Federation have not forgotten this extraordinary God-class operator, still filled with unflagging admiration for him. If at this time, news that his son had been assassinated by official mega-operators of the Federation were to spread, how do you think the military men in service of the Chinese Federation will react? The sweat started to flow freely from the caller's forehead. They may start to suspect that Ling Zhao's death was due to a conspiracy, a sacrifice in the power struggle among the upper ranks of the military. A mutiny may occur within the Federation. Who knew that his boss had been planning to use Ling Lan's death to set up such a large stage? What a pity the opponent also thought of the same thing, and decided to just play along with our trick, choosing to use Ling Zhao's son as a sacrificial pawn to bait us. I think, Even if we really killed Ling Zhao's son, the opponent will be able to fabricate evidence to pin the blame on our empire." The mechanical voice was filled with regret. This exchange was his loss. It was just lucky that he had discovered this early on, and managed to clean up after himself, only exposing some unimportant pawns in the process. Listening to the analysis of the situation by the mechanical voice, the caller's forehead was beaded with sweat. He had almost ruined his superior's grand plan. He quickly nodded and bowed, saying, "Yes, sir, I understand now. We shall scatter our forces and lay low for now. Don't do anything rash. The matter of the Ling family ends here." The mechanical voice decisively gave up on the operation to assassinate Ling Lan. He just could not let the opponent pin the death of Ling Zhao's son upon the head of the empire. Ling Zhao's death had already shown him the fervor of the military men of the Federation. Due to his death, the conflict between the two nations had escalated into an epic long-standing feud, which currently still showed no signs of stopping. If Ling Zhao's son's death became more fuel to the flame, he was afraid that the empire would become overrun by those military men of the Federation and be utterly destroyed. "Yes, sir," responded the caller, before carefully shutting his communicator and turning to relay his superior's orders. Just like that, the threat towards Ling Lan was resolved. When Ling Lan later became the Federation's star warrior of a new generation, these people would be filled with regret, beating themselves up for not choosing to continue with their assassination operation. Meanwhile, the commander of the Blades had received news from 413, who had secretly escorted Ling Lan all the way home. The assassination attempt this time had chilled him, even as it infuriated him. He had never expected that the opponent had already managed to secretly control some of the high-ranking people within the federal military. The band of mecha operators 413 squad had captured and brought in were indeed serving military men of the Federation, but unfortunately, they really didn't know anything and were just a bunch of idiots who had been used. Still, the commander of the Blades had been able to confirm that the power base of the opponent hidden within the Federation was considerable, and that a bunch of traitors had already been gathered around him. But for now, his greatest worry was for Ling Lan's safety. Ling Lan may have narrowly escaped this time, but what about next time? The commander of the Blades hesitated for a brief moment, but finally connected to that particular contact number once more. In the end, when he shut his communicator, the tension in his brows had faded and his expression was light and cheerful. Although that old fellow had mercilessly extorted a substantial sum from him, it was all right as long as his objective had been achieved. At the most he'll just have to take on a couple more strenuous jobs in the meantime, but for the preservation of the bloodline of the Federation, this trouble was worth it. Early the second day, Ling Lan finally escaped from the torments of number 5. With low spirits, she levered herself out of bed and washed up, and then rapidly wolfed down her prepared breakfast. There was no helping it, the distance to school was rather far, so she needed to hurry to make sure she had enough time for the journey. Of course, Ling Lan was also considering whether she should look for a place close to the Scout Academy to live. Wasting so much time every day on commuting was not a sustainable plan in Ling Lan's opinion. Ling Lan decided that she would discuss the matter with her mother when she returned from school that day. Just as she finished her preparations and was about to leave, an unexpected guest showed up on the Ling family doorstep, the Dean of the Central Scout Academy. The Dean's arrival was for one purpose only, and that was for Ling Lan to give up her special class right to be a day student. This was because Ling Lan was the only person this year who chose to be a day student, so the Dean was concerned that Ling Lan's grades and progress would be held back by this. Of course, as the Academy was the one to request for the student to relinquish this right, the Academy promised that Ling Lan could request something else from the Academy, as long as the request was within the Academy's means. Although Lan Luofeng was very tempted by this offer, she could not agree. Why had Ling Lan chosen to be a day student to begin with after all? Because of the problem of her gender. If she stayed with someone else, the risk of exposure would be too high. Lan Luofeng could not afford to take the risk. Even if Lan Luofeng wanted to refuse, she still needed to have a legitimate reason for refusing. This moment fully displayed Lan Luofeng's ability to improvise. In an instant, she actually managed to concoct a believable excuse. She said that ever since Ling Zhao had passed away, she had contracted an extremely severe case of depression. Consequently, she could not bear to be apart from her loved ones for long. If Ling Lan were to board at the school, she would be unable to control herself, and may end up harming herself. Ling Qian, who was standing to one side, was very cooperative, immediately affecting an extremely morose expression, nodding gravely to affirm that what his mistress said was true. Meanwhile, with a face full of worry for her mother, Ling Lan regretfully declined the dean's kind offer. Playing the pity card was obviously a smart move, for the dean's expression was awkward and filled with helplessness. Just as the three believed that the dean would give up on his plan, the dean seemed to come to some momentous decision and suggested an arrangement that shocked the three of them. He actually suggested that Lan Luofeng live together with Ling Lan in the school, and since the academy had the ironclad rule of not allowing non-staff to live on campus, the dean even went so far as to offer Lan Luofeng a position at the school as a teaching assistant, so that she could legitimately board at the school. The dean also promised that Ling Lan and her mother could live alone in one of the villas at the school, where they wouldn't be disturbed. On top of that, the dean even specially permitted Lan Luofeng to bring along 2 servants to help her manage the villa. With this, there was no longer any reason for the three to refuse. Ling Lan quickly thanked the dean, agreed that she would relinquish her right to be a day student, and would try her best to finalize the procedures required to board at the school as soon as possible. Having received a satisfactory answer, the dean was greatly pleased and automatically offered to give Ling Lan the day off so that she could finalize all the procedures today itself. Then, without leaving a trace of his visit, he left, only leaving behind 3 dumbfounded people who hadn't regained their senses sitting in the living room. The dean walked out of the Ling family gates, boarded his hover car, and finally dropped his noble bearing to slump in his seat. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, and once again lamented to himself at how difficult the Ling family was to handle. He thought back to the time when he had to persuade Ling Zhao. He had also had to sacrifice a lot then to succeed. However, he had still managed to achieve what his old friend had asked of him. Although the academy had had to pay a steep price, the result was still wonderful. The dean smiled in satisfaction. He had gotten many concessions from his old friend for this, so it was overall worth it. Ling Qian was the first to regain his senses. With a face full of joy, he turned to say to Lan Luofeng, "Mistress, this is a great thing. If young Master Lan lives at the school, her safety is guaranteed." Lan Luofeng remained uncertain and suspicious, smiling wryly as she said, "Uncle Qin, why do you think the academy is so accommodating towards Ling Lan, even going so far as to open a back door like this for her?" "I'm very worried." Ling Lan had just been ambushed, and now right after, the Central Scout Academy is giving Ling Lan such preferential treatment. It should be known that the gates of the Central Scout Academy were not so easily entered. The work benefits offered by the school was unquestionably the best in the Federation, so even a lowly teaching assistant position there was still highly sought after by countless highly educated people. Lan Luofeng had never dreamed that such a coveted position would just fall into her lap due to her connection with Ling Lan. Of course, Lan Luofeng was not impressed by the position since she didn't need it. Although the Ling family seemed weak now, it still had a substantial foundation, enough so that both Ling Lan and Lan Luofeng could live n lifetimes without having to trouble themselves over living expenses. Lan Luofeng's words made Ling Qian hesitate as well. Could it be that this was just another plot against Ling Lan? Ling Qian was beginning to become a little fearful. The assassination attempt and its series of attacks had troubled the heart of the old man, and he hadn't had time to get over it yet. Seeing this, Ling Lan hurried to remind them, "I hear that the Central Scout Academy has the highest safety ranking, and students are prized most highly by the academy. Ever since the academy has been established, not a single student has ever been harmed on school grounds." "Grandpa Ling Qian, is this rumor true?" Ling Qian's eyes brightened, as if reminded of something. "Mistress, Young Master Lan is correct. The Scout Academies are run independently of any government or military system, and God-class operators are the ones in charge of protecting them. Lincoln's gaze was passionate and heated. Ling Lan was very familiar with such eyes. Some rabid fans of superstars in her previous world had eyes which shined with the exact same type of light. Ling Lan knew that Lincoln's passionate reaction was drawn out by the God-class operators he mentioned. What exactly was that all about? Ling Lan was determined to let Little Four dig up some information on this later on. Suddenly, she realized that she really didn't know much about this world at all. The assassination incident had given her her first glimpse of real mecha, blinding her with obsession for a moment. These past few years, she had just been focused on training hard and had rather neglected all the interesting things in the outside world. In truth, Ling Lan could not be blamed for this. Some information was actually classified by the government, and Little Four had felt that Ling Lan really didn't need to know about these sort of things at her age, and so hadn't collected these information. As such, Ling Lan naturally wouldn't have known about any of this. Thus, poor Ling Lan was still unaware that her father was the idol of the military men of the Federation, and that he had been the youngest God-class operator of the Federation. Lincoln's words reassured Lan Luofeng, and so she happily ran upstairs to pack for both Ling Lan and herself. Just like that, Ling Lan did not show up in Special Class A for the first official day of school. When the homeroom teacher of Special Class A glossed over the fact that Ling Lan had already applied for the day off, his tone was obviously protective. This stirred up the discontent of the other students in Special Class A, provoking a flurry of private discussion. While Qilong didn't think much of the matter, Luo Lang seemed to have sensed something, but only Han Jijian had a serious expression on his face. Boss Lan, who are you really? Chapter 67, The Impudent Challenger. In the mirror, a little boy was wearing the rumored military-style uniform of Special Class A. The bold red, the fitting tailoring, the glittering bronze leather boots that were so polished that one could almost see one's reflection in it, and the leather belt with a metal buckle around his waist, all of it added a dash of charm to the already handsome boy, swaying the heart of the woman beside him, causing her heart to swell with motherly love. Lan Luofeng framed her face with her hands, expression dreamy as she said, Lan Lan, you really look so much like your daddy today, so handsome beyond compare. Ling Lan couldn't help but roll her eyes. Praise her if she wanted to praise her. Why did she have to bring up her old man? Could it be that she was praising her on the surface, but was actually thinking about her old man? Thinking about Lan Luofeng's long previous history of such occurrences, Ling Lan was pretty sure her mum was caught up in her own romantic fantasies again. She decided to disregard the woman, turning to say to Ling Nanny directly, Grandma Chamberlain, I leave Mom in your care. Ling Nanny was Chamberlain Lincoln's wife. This time, moving into the Scout Academy, Lan Luofeng and Ling Lan had brought Ling Nanny along, tasking her with the running of the villa. And Ling Nanny had then also selected a servant girl who was deadly loyal to the Ling family with an impeccable record to come along with her, to help her with the cleaning of the villa. With a smile, Ling Nanny replied, Young Master Lan, please don't worry. That done, Ling Lan waved goodbye to them and walked to the villa doors. Just as she opened the door, Lan Luofeng finally shook herself out of her love-dazed state. Ling Lan, what do you take your mother for? You ingrate! Lan Luofeng bellowed from behind her. She had just registered what Ling Lan was implying, and her ire was raised. Ling Lan turned to look back with a smile. Congratulations, Mum, you haven't become a complete idiot. That said, she slipped out of the house. Crash! Some unidentified items slammed into the doors, and Lan Luofeng's lion roar could be heard once again. Ling Lan, just you wait. You'll get it once you get home. With a smile on her lips, Ling Lan left the villa behind. She knew her mum was just talk. When she really returned later, her mum would definitely hug her close and kiss her all over her face, almost seeming as if she wouldn't stop until Ling Lan's face was visibly swollen with her love. There was a time when Ling Lan wondered whether this bad habit was something her mum had learned from her dad. But unfortunately she had no frame of reference, and so the truth would never be known. Ling Lan slowly walked over to the main road which led to this patch of villas. At this dawn hour, there were already quite a few children and teens about, dressed in the same red uniform. Though their ages ranged, the direction they were headed in was the same, towards the learning area of the Scout Academy. It turned out that this villa area that Ling Lan was boarding in was specially allocated for the special Class A students, from the 1st grade to the 10th grade. All of them were in this area. However, very few of these students were walking like Ling Lan. They wore shoes which jetted air out backwards and were flying freely over the main road. These shoes were called jet rollers, very similar to the roller skates of Ling Lan's previous world, which had wheels attached to the bottom of the shoes in either 2 rows or just one single row. However, jet rollers were even more advanced than roller skates. On both sides of the shoes and the heel area, miniature drivers were installed, which could draw power from the energy storage unit to power the jets. When a certain velocity was achieved, the shoes would lift off the ground along with the person wearing them. Of course, their maximum achievable height was only about 2.5 meters. Ling Lan was a little puzzled. The school rules did not allow students to use external powers to fly or speed around within school grounds. How could these special class students be so daring to do so blatantly? It can be confirmed that these students are all 2nd grade and above, Little Four jumped out to say. Look it up. Why can they use jet rollers in school? Ling Lan didn't believe that they were so free just because they were in special class A. There must be some other reason. Found it. Apparently they used battle points to redeem those jet rollers, which is why they can use them in school. Little Four was reliable as ever, piggybacking on a random wireless signal to log on to the school intranet, and quickly finding the answer that Ling Lan needed. The redeemed jet rollers are specially customized by Central Scout Academy, tagged with the Central Scout Academy's identification code, which is why they can be used within the school grounds. Other jet rollers are forbidden. If found to be used, demerits will apply, and the student will immediately be downgraded by 1 class level. Without waiting for Ling Lan to prompt him, Little Four continued to supplement his explanation. That's more like it. Ling Lan had just been wondering how the academy could differentiate between redeemed jet rollers and those brought in from the outside, but Little Four's explanation answered all her questions. She stared enviously at those seniors zooming around, and decided that she would also redeem one when she had the chance later on. Ling Lan walked to one of the hover car stops servicing the villa areas. The academy was just too vast. If the students were to walk, they would definitely not get to the learning area within an hour. And as new students, they didn't have jet rollers, so the only way they could save time was to rely on these hover car stops set up by the academy. Even before she arrived at the stop, Ling Lan could see the long line of people in wait. A little put off, Ling Lan scratched her brow. Looks like she wouldn't be able to take the first few cars, but hopefully she wouldn't be late still. Ling Lan had actually left the house a little late due to Lan Luofeng's fussing. Ling Lan maintained her current speed as she walked towards the stop. Right then, she heard a familiar voice shouting out from somewhere not far behind her. Jijian, Luo Lang, hurry up, we're going to be late. It was Qi Long. Ling Lan was extremely surprised. What a coincidence to bump into Qi Long and the others here. A mischievous smirk appeared on her lips. The 3 boys still didn't know she had started boarding at the school, so they probably wouldn't expect to bump into her here so early in the morning. Sure enough, Qi Long didn't notice that the person walking in front of him was Ling Lan. Just as he was about to zoom past Ling Lan, she stuck a foot out in his path. Qi Long, watch out! From behind, Luo Lang could see this very clearly, but because he was too far away, he couldn't do anything to stop Qi Long aside from yelling out to him, hoping that he would notice in time. Qi Long truly had the intuition of a wild beast. Ling Lan had stuck her foot out at the most perfect timing to catch him unawares, but even so, just before the moment Qi Long would trip, he managed to catch himself in time to draw his feet back enough to just slide by Ling Lan's foot, escaping the fate of being tripped. However, everything happened too fast, so Qi Long's rhythm was still thrown off. His landing was uneven and he stumbled, almost falling down anyway. "You goddamn bastard." After finding his feet, Qilong turned around, raging, fully prepared to teach the sneaky fellow a lesson, but was faced with Ling Lan's cheeky grin instead. "Boss, it's you." Qilong was overjoyed. He took a large step forward and enveloped Ling Lan in a bear hug, before voicing his doubts. "Why are you here?" Han Jijian and Luo Leng had also rushed over angrily in the meantime, but at Qilong's joyful shout, their anger melted away into pleasant surprise. Han Jijian's eyes were even sparkling as he asked, "Boss Lan, you've decided to board at school?" Seeing Ling Lan here, there should be no other possibility. Helplessly, Ling Lan said, "I had no choice. The school forcefully cancelled my day study right, so I could only board at the school." "That's great. Now we can always learn and train together." Qilong was the most pleased by this. He finally had someone who could keep up with him in a fight. Yesterday, he had sparred with Luo Lang, but Qilong had not been satisfied at all. Sparring with Boss Lan was still the best, although he would always be thoroughly trounced by Boss Lan. Han Jijian and Luo Lang's expressions were also pleased though, and amidst laughter and chit-chat, they arrived at the hover car stop. By this time, there was already much fewer people waiting in line. Han Jijian flashed his communicator at the stop's sensor, and the sensor responded in an automated mechanical voice. "The hover car you require will arrive in 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Please be ready." Very quickly, the students lining up before them had all boarded a hover car and left, and their group of 4 was next. The academy's hover cars were all built for 4 people, with 2 seats in the front row and back row respectively, and looked quite like a convertible car from Earth. Their hover car arrived very punctually, 3 minutes 20 seconds later on the dot from the time Han Jijian had checked. Ling Lan's group of 4 seated themselves randomly on the 2 rows and selected the first-year special Class A classroom as their destination. They had just arrived at the classroom doors when the preparatory bell indicating the start of class rang out from within the classroom. The children within the classroom immediately found their seats and began their final preparations for the day ahead. When Ling Lan walked in, she drew their curious gazes. Because Ling Lan's was an unfamiliar face, they quickly surmised that Ling Lan was the mysterious student of probable remarkable origin who had taken leave on the very first day of school yesterday. Han Jijian signaled Ling Lan to follow him. It turned out that the homeroom teacher had already assigned everyone's seats yesterday, and Ling Lan's seat was directly behind Han Jijian's, while Qilong and Luo Lang were seated to the right and left of Ling Lan. How did it end up this way? Ling Lan was very surprised. This arrangement was very convenient for them to converse and interact, but it was just too coincidental for all 4 of them to be seated together. With a resigned expression on his face, Han Jijian replied, "Your seat and mine are according to the teacher's original arrangement, but Qilong's and Luo Leng's are the results of battle." It looked like Han Jijian had tried to stop Qilong and Luo Leng, but had not succeeded. "What do you mean results of battle?" Ling Lan was curious. Qilong piped up excitedly from the side, after the teacher finished assigning the seats. He said that if anyone was unhappy with their seats, they could challenge the student who had the seat they wanted. If they won the challenge, then they could switch seats. If they lost, then they'll have to serve the student they challenged for a month. Both Luo Leng and I won. Ling Lan was speechless. This world was truly a dangerous world. They were all so young, but the teacher was already starting to cultivate their fighting spirit. Looks like she really couldn't take it easy if she wanted to achieve something in this world. Right at that moment, the bell signaling the official start of class reverberated through the classroom, and an elegant and refined youth sedately entered the classroom. He was their first-grade special Class A homeroom teacher. In the new students' first week, there was no official teaching. The first half of the day was taken up by a course teaching them about the academy's rules, while the later part of the afternoon was allocated for physical training and getting used to the academy's training machinery and facilities. The homeroom teacher of Special Class A was named Cheng Yuanhang. When he saw Ling Lan, his gaze turned cold, and then he announced to the class, "Yesterday I said that if anyone had a seat they preferred, they could challenge the owner of that seat as they liked. Originally, The activity should have ended yesterday, but because a student was absent yesterday, we could not just end it. So, I'll ask again today. Does anyone here want Ling Lan's seat? Ling Lan's brow furrowed. Looks like the homeroom teacher didn't like her, otherwise he wouldn't specifically call her out by name. The students looked at one another, but no one made a peep. Nobody wanted to challenge Ling Lan. Think about it. Challenging a fellow student with unknown capabilities just for a seat that was not that much different from another, and if you lost, you'd have to serve the other for a month. No matter how you looked at it, it just wasn't worth it. Although Ling Lan's rank was only 17, Qilong and Luolang, whose rankings were behind him, had risen up like dark horses and had shown just how unexpectedly strong they were. The students couldn't help but be wary after that. Just as Chen Yuanhang thought no one would challenge, a weak and skinny child stood up and said, "I want to challenge." Lin Zongqing? All the students were in an uproar. The dead last of Special Class A actually wanted to challenge the upper middle ranking Ling Lan. Wasn't that just looking for trouble? Chapter 68. You've lost. Ling Lan wasn't particularly bothered by Lin Zongqing's impudent challenge, but her follower Qilong was riled up instead. He felt as if his boss had been looked down upon, so with a loud slap on his table, he stood up and shouted, "Damn it! Daring to challenge my boss? You're too cocky." "Teacher Ching, I'm willing to accept his challenge and fight on behalf of my boss." Qilong's interruption startled Lin Zongqing, but then a trace of glee flashed through his eyes. Perhaps no one else saw it, but Ling Lan did. Of course, all the credit should be given to Little Four, who was comprehensively monitoring the classroom. No one's expression within the classroom could escape Little Four's sharp eyes. Qilong's unexpected request for battle caused rage to cross Chen Yuanhang's face. Coldly, he said, "Qilong, don't test my patience." Chen Yuanhang had really been angered. How old were these children? Already forming groups and saying boss this boss that. What do they take this sacred Central Scout Academy for? Chen Yuanhang was of commoner descent, and had only achieved the success he had today via the cultivation of the Central Scout Academy. As such, he deeply loved the academy, and loathed any bad children that might harm the academy's reputation. And Ling Lan, Qilong, and the others in his group, were all bad children in Chen Yuanhang's eyes, especially Ling Lan. On the very first day of school, he had already made the dean come personally to request leave for him. Chen Yuanhang was very dissatisfied by this. The esteemed dean was the person Chen Yuanhang respected the most. In his opinion, getting the honorable dean himself to come and handle the trivial procedures of applying for leave, this must definitely be due to pressure exerted by the power backing Ling Lan. Because of this, Chen Yuanhang privately came to the conclusion that Ling Lan's inclusion in Special Class A must be due to manipulation of a backdoor. Against these second-generation rich degenerates who relied on their family background and power, he was full of contempt. Therefore, Chen Yuanhang had decided to give Ling Lan a harsh awakening right at the start of today, so that the boy would understand that the Central Scout Academy was not a place where he could dominate just with his family connections. Of course, Qilong wasn't content to just step back. Just as he was about to argue the point, Ling Lan stepped out from the side and pressed him back into his seat, signaling for him to stop speaking. Ling Lan then turned to look at Chen Yuanhang, and asked serenely, "What do you think, teacher?" Chen Yuanhang gave her two options. "You can choose to accept the challenge, or you can refuse." "But refusing means that you automatically give up your seat." "Student Ling Lan, what is your choice?" Ling Lan looked steadily at Lin Zongqing, and said, "Since student Lin wants to challenge, of course I shall accept." When Lin Zongqing heard Ling Lan accept, a complicated expression crossed his face. There was a trace of unease, but more a sense of relief. This was not the typical expression a challenger should have. "Boss, looks like that midget has an ulterior motive in challenging you." Once again, Little Four had caught on to Lin Zongqing's change in expression, and spoke up to caution Ling Lan. "Okay, let's wait and see." Ling Lan secretly put up her guard. Although Lin Zongqing looked rather weak, she had read on many amount of novels, comics, and anime, and knew that there were many main characters who liked to pretend to be weak to fool their opponents. 1. Who knew if this Lin Zonking wasn't someone like this? Ling Lan kept her attention focused as she continued her vigilance. Ling Lan's acceptance of the challenge caused all the first-year special Class A students to become excited. Under Chen Yuanhang's lead, the whole class came to one of the combat halls within the academy. Walking up to the information input station within the main hall, Chen Yuanhang personally keyed in Ling Lan and Lin Zonking's battle request, and under Nature of Combat, he selected the option of Open Arena. Pensively, Ling Lan glanced at Chen Yuanhang. Looks like this teacher was really against her. It wasn't just her imagination. This wasn't the first time Ling Lan had came to this combat hall. On registration day itself, she had already requested a fight here before together with Qi Long. Thus, she knew very well that there were many options under Nature of Combat, ranging from closed and private, closed small arena, semi-open small arena, open small arena, closed arena, semi-open arena, to open arena. Any option with closed meant the fight would be private and hidden, rejecting any viewing audience, just like her spar with Qi Long. Back then, they had chosen a closed and private battle, while this battle between her and Lin Zonking was actually best suited for the semi-open small arena option. A semi-open battle would open a unique combat room, and audience members would need to have the room's passcode to enter. They would just have to let the Class A students know the passcode, then they would have been able to fight a match without any outside disturbance. In that situation, even the side who lost wouldn't have his embarrassment broadcast to the public and lose face. But an open fight was different. This type of battle was open for viewing for all students within the Central Scout Academy. Furthermore, before the fight, the combat hall would even do a comprehensive announcement. As such, open battles were usually only used during the ranking battles every 6 months, extremely rare under normal circumstances. Sure enough, the news of the open arena battle was announced repetitively by the combat hall, drawing all the other students who were here for their own individual practice to the side of their ring. When this impromptu audience saw that there were 2 new students on the stage wearing eye-catching red clothes, they knew it was a fight between special Class A kids. Pleasantly surprised, they started discussing the fight in earnest, and the atmosphere around the arena became even livelier. Quite a few students even turned on their communicators so they could contact their good friends to come spectate as well. Ling Lan and Lin Zonking were currently standing on the left and right side of the stage respectively, facing each other. In contrast with Ling Lan's calm composure, Lin Zonking looked extremely nervous. Chen Yuanhang looked at the 2 people on the stage and asked them, "Are you 2 ready?" The 2 nodded in confirmation, and Chen Yuanhang issued the command, "Battle, start." Lin Zonking heard Chen Yuanhang's call to start, but he didn't choose to attack immediately. Instead, he retreated swiftly, putting some distance between him and Ling Lan. "What is he trying to do?" asked Little Four in confusion. "We'll know when we fight. By the way, Little Four, while I'm fighting, don't make any sound to distract me," reminded Ling Lan worriedly. She still remembered the time a while back when she had been going through combat training with the Ling family loyalists. Due to Little Four's inopportune interruption, she had been struck heavily by one of the loyalists, almost gaining a serious injury. Fortunately, the Ling family medicinal bath and the Qi exercises were very reliable, supporting Ling Lan so she didn't have any lasting damage. Still, that one time was enough to scare Ling Lan half to death. It turned out that her life was still not guaranteed. Little Four immediately pulled an imaginary zipper across his mouth in response, signaling that his lips were sealed. He would definitely not cause Ling Lan any trouble. Ling Lan activated her qi circulation, and could instantly feel all her senses heighten. When she looked at Lin Zonking once again, she had the feeling as if the entire course of the battle was within her grasp. It was glorious. This was also part of the results of 2 nights of training under number 5, a newly discovered ability. Although it had only been 2 nights in real time, due to the time rate conversion, Ling Lan had actually been tormented viciously under number 5's hand for a little over 2 months, almost driving Ling Lan up the wall. Luckily, this ability had progressed from its erratic functionality based on her mental condition, to its current stable functioning of working 5 to 6 times out of 10. Ling Lan's suffering had been worth it. The next second was it. Ling Lan's intuition told her that Lin Zongqing's attack was coming. Sure enough, of the two people facing off, Lin Zongqing was the first to attack. He swooped in abruptly, and his angle of attack was a tricky one. Many of the higher grade students nodded in approval when they saw Lin Zongqing's attack. Lin Zongqing's timing was spot on as well. The time he attacked was precisely the point when a human's mental focus would wane after intense concentration. It was when people were the slowest. Moreover, his attack stance was also great, not just any regular combat art. However, Ling Lan's reaction shocked and awed the watching students. As if well prepared, Lin Zongqing's attack only made her move a tiny step, and with a slight tilt of her body, she had easily dodged his attack. FCK, this kid is just too confident in himself. Actually choosing to dodge in such a narrow range, isn't that too much? The older students were all rather stunned, and started criticizing Ling Lan for being too reckless in her evasion movements. Qilong and Luolang looked at one another, and read the shock and surprise on each other's faces. They knew very well that using the smallest angle possible to dodge was Ling Lan's specialty. This was definitely the most energy-efficient way of dodging, but only Ling Lan would dare to do so. Qilong and Luolang didn't even dare to try. This was closely related to confidence and ability, and they just weren't at that level yet. However, what shocked and surprised them was not that they were familiar with this evasion move, but because they had sensed that Ling Lan had an even deeper understanding of this type of small-range evasion now, which made her movements look extremely graceful and natural. Lin Zongqing's first strike struck air, but he didn't retreat directly, choosing to follow up with a flurry of combo punches, moving forward with the determined dare of wanting to defeat quality with sheer quantity too. Unfortunately, Ling Lan's strength was really just too far above him. This sort of tactic was no problem at all for Ling Lan. Gently swaying her body, Ling Lan swiftly dodged all of Lin Zongqing's combination attacks, and somehow, she found herself once again in that strange state she had achieved during her fight with the 5 alpha wolves. This state was still currently not under Ling Lan's control, so whether she could enter it or not was really up to her luck. Once she entered this state, all of Lin Zongqing's attacks became weakness after weakness in Ling Lan's eyes. With just one punch, she would be able to knock Lin Zongqing down. It's just, now, seeing Lin Zongqing's desperation as he attacked with clenched teeth, his rage and stubbornness made Ling Lan decide to just wait a little longer. Lin Zongqing's boxing skills only consisted of a few moves, and after Ling Lan saw the second repetition of the attack pattern, she knew it was time to end this. Ling Lan did nothing other than make a simple fist, and throw it out firmly at the largest weak point in her eyes. Bam! Ling Lan's fist smacked into a soft ball of flesh, and then that thing was sent flying out like a cannonball, to land heavily on the arena floor. With just this punch, Lin Zongqing had been hit, and was now lying still on the ground without any sign of getting up. All the observing students were gobsmacked. Was this not a battle between two special Class A students, but rather a battle between a special Class A student and someone from the regular classes? They knew very well that although special Class A had a ranking of 50 spots, all the children didn't really differ much in terms of ability, and were practically on par with each other. But this scene before them shattered everything they knew. Was there such a large gap, such as that between clouds in the sky and dirt on the ground, even among the special Class A students? "You've lost," said Ling Lan calmly towards the fellow lying on the stage who was still unwilling to get up. Although her punch had seemed heavy, it definitely would not have done any significant damage to the opponent. Chapter 69, Ling Lan's Problem. Expression dark, Lin Zongqing sprang to his feet and said dejectedly, "It's my loss." However, he quickly raised his head again, and with wide, open eyes, and a face full of tenacity, he added, "But the next time, I won't lose to you again." The fight and confidence in his eyes were still present, not at all dampened by this loss. Contemplatively, Ling Lan looked at him, and then said sedately, "I'll be waiting." This little guy was no fool. With that performance, He had probably drawn the attention of the homeroom teacher. Sure enough, Chen Yuanhang started applauding from below the stage, expression approving as he said with a smile, "Not bad, Ling Lan, as expected of one of the higher-ranking students in our class." Then, he turned to look at Lin Zongking with an expression of deep appreciation for talent, clearly showing who Chen Yuanhang truly approved of, and said, "Lin Zongking, your performance was very good. Failure is the mother of success. Keep it up, you'll succeed one day." Hearing this, Ling Lan was speechless. "Teacher Ching, oh Teacher Ching, when you say this, could you not do it right in front of me?" Wasn't this just cursing her to one day lose at Lin Zongking's hands? Ling Lan was currently simmering with resentment. Receiving Chen Yuanhang's praise and encouragement, Lin Zongking suppressed the gratefulness in his heart as he replied, "Understood, teacher, I will work hard." That's awesome. He had managed to leave a good impression on his homeroom teacher. Lin Zongking gave himself a mental fist pump. Then, he turned to look at Ling Lan, who was standing across from him with his hands folded before him, and doubt rose in his heart. Subconsciously, he swept his gaze to the area below the stage and saw Li Yingji's unconcealed anger at Ling Lan's success in the limelight. At that, his mind settled. Heaven destroys those who don't look out for themselves. By this time, Little Four had sensed Lin Zongking's intentions. In the mind space, he was so angry that he was stomping around, insisting that Ling Lan should teach that horrible punk a lesson. Better yet, she should beat him up until his own mum couldn't recognize him. Darn it, actually daring to think of using his boss. Did he really think his boss would be so easily taken advantage of? At this moment, Ling Lan was flipping through the files on Lin Zongking which Little Four had passed to her. She found out that Lin Zongking was a commoner child, and tracing back in generations, all information indicated that his family was of perfectly normal commoner descent. Lin Zongking's rank body and Tier 1 spiritual power were definitely due to a type of genetic mutation. The child was really quite pitiful. For the sake of money and other benefits, his parents had given him to the military as research material. However, after 6 years of research, Lin Zongking was determined as the result of a lucky genetical mishap, and so did not have any research value whatsoever in the stimulation of genetic mutation. As a material with no research value, the military was unconcerned about his whereabouts. Thus, Lin Zongking became a member of the Central Scout Academy this year. For such a person of 3 lakhs, lacking family, lacking money, and lacking power, what was it that pushed him to challenge Ling Lan? If Lin Zongking had only continued to maintain a low profile and avoid attention, he could have smoothly completed his 10 years of education at the Central Scout Academy, and then be free to choose the future he wanted. But he had instead chosen to grandstand, and though he had indeed managed to attract the homeroom teacher's attention, the disadvantages were obviously greater than the benefits, and Lin Zongking did not seem like an impetuous person. Thinking of this, Ling Lan said, "Little Four, dig a little deeper. I don't think this matter is that simple." Little Four patted his little chest energetically, saying, "Boss, don't worry. I'll keep a close all-rounded watch on Lin Zongking. I'll definitely find out his secret." That said, Little Four scarpered off to write out his comprehensive monitoring plan, seeming as if he would not rest until he found out everything there was to know about Lin Zongking. At this moment, Ling Lan made a silent prayer for Lin Zongking. Being targeted by Little Four basically meant that he would have no more secrets to himself. And so Ling Lan and Lin Zongking's fight ended just like that. But the ripples following the event were not over yet. Among the special class students of the upper grades, rumors spread about a first-grade special class A kid who was extremely strong, so much so that his class A classmate, who was also within the top 50, had been defeated with just one blow. Everyone began to anticipate the ranking battles coming in 6 months. Every year, the top-ranking student of Class A had the right to challenge across grades. Who knew how far this first-year Class A student could go? How many grades ahead could he defeat? These people didn't even consider the possibility that Ling Lan wouldn't be the top-ranking student. At that thought, the first-grade students were keyed up, while the upper-grade students were eager as well. ready to teach this arrogant upstart a good lesson. As the rumors spread, they became more and more twisted, finally skewed in such a way that Ling Lan became an extremely strong and capable punk with a terribly arrogant attitude. In the 4th grade special class A sunny youngster grinned cheekily as he said to his companion beside him, "Shoo, with such a formidable kid in the 1st grade, your little cousin brother's position at the top is at risk. That brat Yingji, if he doesn't take a loss, he would really think that he's at the top of the world." Li Shi's face was full of contempt as he said this, as if extremely scornful of his own younger cousin. "You Li family members are really something. If your eldest cousin brother really has no talent, then why do you all insist on making him the first in line to inherit, causing your entire household to be full of civil strife? So troublesome." The sunshine youngster was grateful that he was born in the Yun family, although there were also some messy affairs within the family. In comparison with the Li family, those issues were not really issues at all, so his family affairs could even be described as clean. "Yun Ziyu, you look down on my eldest cousin?" Li Shi's expression was a little strange as he glanced at him. Yun Ziyu threw a sarcastic look at him. "You think? He's older than you by a few months, but he couldn't even qualify for the Central Scout Academy. I heard he was sent by our grandpa family head to the Li family origin planet of Azure to study at the Scout Academy there. Looks like your family head isn't optimistic about this first inheritor of your family." Planet Azure was a third-rate planet, and was one of those planets that were rather behind on resources. It could not compare at all with the premium capital planet of Doha. Typically, any child with even a speck of talent would never be assigned there. Who knows? Li Shi's expression was a little lost. He had not had many encounters with his eldest cousin because ever since his eldest cousin had been born, he had been taken away by grandfather for personal training. From young, the times they met were fewer than few, countable on just one hand. But even so, he had a very deep impression of this elder cousin brother of his. This profound impression was not due to his status as first inheritor, but was something caused by the very essence of his elder cousin himself. His eldest cousin had a warm aura about him that invited others close, mysteriously drawing in the people around him. Even if everyone in the Li family said that his eldest cousin wasn't fit to be the first inheritor, he had never seen a trace of resentment or dissatisfaction in his cousin's bearing. That never-changing, warm smile led others to become reflexively happy in his presence. Although Li Shi was also a strong contender for the right to inherit, every time after he met his eldest cousin, the yearning to fight for it would lessen just a little more. Sometimes, he even felt that letting his eldest cousin become the family head wasn't such a bad idea. He would be very willing to help his cousin blaze his way forward, eliminating any rebellious Li family members in his path. Li Shi shook his head, trying to dislodge this notion. His parents would never allow him to do so. He couldn't help but sigh softly. "My eldest cousin is hard to understand. Viewing him as an enemy is very difficult." Ever since their eldest cousin brother left for Planet Azure, he had not returned in 4 years. Quite likely, Li Yingji had very little memory of this cousin brother, which was why he was so fixated on getting the inheritor position. If he really met their eldest cousin, he would very likely start gradually losing the motivation to steal this right from him. "The old grandfather of your family is still going strong anyhow. Any fight over the position will still have to wait for many years later. It's still too early to think about all this. But, I'm curious, when that self-important younger cousin of yours gets robbed of his rank at the top, what will his expression be like?" Yun Ziyu smirked evilly. It was his favorite thing to see the expressions of those pompous brats who thought they were geniuses when they were being ground into the dirt. "Ho, so your vulgar taste remains unchanged. Well, you'll see in 6 months, teased Li Shi, expression light and casual. Li Yingji wasn't the eldest cousin he didn't want to fight. He would gladly see him become a laughingstock. Alright, so brotherly ties were weak in the Li family to begin with. It's just that this generation had produced an oddball like his eldest cousin brother. Leave me alone, aren't you even more vulgar? That's your younger cousin, you know. Yun Ziyu smacked Li Shu's shoulder in mock anger. Li Shu's interest in seeing Li Yingji make a fool of himself was no less than his own. As expected of someone from the Li family, Li Shu just laughed at Yun Ziyu. One really didn't need that many friends. Sometimes just having one who really understood you was enough. Ling Lan's study life had officially begun, or we should say, Ling Lan was getting along just fine. Although the homeroom teacher Chen Yuanhang had treated her rather harshly on her first day, he had changed his original view of her after seeing her impressive performance, and consequently no longer went out of his way to give her trouble. This was one of the payoffs of her battle with Lin Zongqing. Another payoff was her popularity among the Class A students. The entire class consisted of boys. Ling Lan's current identity was that of a boy, so we can just ignore this irregular case, and they followed the mentality of survival of the fittest. As such, Ling Lan's defeat of the last place Lin Zongqing in one move was greatly admired by all her classmates, so they all wanted to be friends with her. This was because they felt that they themselves would have been unable to pull off what Ling Lan had done. Of course, there were still some who were averse to Ling Lan, such as the small group that was led by Li Yingji. They shunned her subtly, and were even a little combative at times. Regarding this, Ling Lan was apathetic. She had never considered herself as a femme fatale invincible from all angles, someone who had flowers blooming in her presence, people falling at her feet, who caused havoc on heaven and earth, disturbing gods and spirits alike with her beauty. Ling Lan was of the opinion that such a woman was definitely not human, thus, it was perfectly normal for there to be people who didn't like her. Furthermore, speaking of Li Yingji, she also didn't like him in return. That smug look of his was just like that of a narcissistic peacock, not cute at all. Fine, although Ling Lan wasn't a pure face con one, she was a certified mo con too, only being fond of pretty and adorable children. However, the fight didn't just bring Ling Lan good results, it also brought along a large problem, and that was this uninvited guest, Lin Zongqing. Before her, even though Ling Lan had refused the month of service he owed her after he lost his challenge, Lin Zongqing would not accept it. He still insisted on paying this debt with full diligence. According to Lin Zongqing, you reap what you sow. He took the gamble, so he must pay the price. This was what a true man must do. Chapter 70. The Meaning of Companions. Lin Zongqing's decision was supported by many of the students in Class A. Even teacher Chen Yuanhang was full of approval, but Ling Lan was aggravated by it. Bastard! Ling Lan cursed in a very unladylike fashion, extremely disdainful of the people who supported Lin Zongqing's high-handed way of doing things. Was causing trouble to others really something a real man would do? Alright, perhaps if she really was a boy, she wouldn't be so confused by this. But damn it, she was a girl, definitely a girl, forever a girl. If she let a boy serve her in such close range, and if the truth came out, how would she still get married in the future? Ling Lan had still not given up on the idea of getting married as her true self in the future, primarily because she really wanted to give birth to a child of her own to play with. Adding up the ages of both her lifetimes, she was already an old lady of over 30 years old. Her mental age was definitely at that particular stage where she desperately wanted to get married and have kids. However, Ling Lan was still rational and knew that she could only think about it for now. If she really wanted to have a child, she would still need to wait for this body to mature, and for that, she would still need to wait for about 10 years. Or was it 20 years? When the horrific concept of 20 whole years crashed into Ling Lan's awareness, Ling Lan was immediately reduced to tears. How was she to pass her days from now on? Did she really have to wait until her mental age was already at the level of the Grand Monkey King, Sun Wukong, before she would be able to wed and have kids? While Ling Lan was still caught up in her melancholic musings and her endless resentment at the cruel drag of time, completely lost in her own mind, that extremely troublesome person in her life right now appeared again. Classmate Ling Lan, here are the notes for the previous theory class that I've spent all night compiling. Respectfully, Lin Zongqing came over to hand over a Blu-ray USB storage drive from this world. The storage drive was very advanced, One only had to align one's wrist communicator to face the drive and turn on the Blu-ray function to transfer all the data within the drive into the communicator, to be read at the user's convenience. Ling Lan wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry at Lin Zongqing's good intentions. She really had no need at all for any notes, for Little Four had the ability to record the entire lecture of a teacher, available for her to peruse whenever she needed. Of course, Little Four's supremacy could only be fully realized within this period of time. When it came to the second half of the year, the first-grade students would be allowed to enter the virtual world to study, so they would no longer have to fear being left helpless when they couldn't understand their lessons. In the virtual world, all the Academy's courses had an equivalent virtual counterpart. However, every time one accessed these virtual classes, one would have to spend credits, that is money, or use battle points to redeem credits for use. Lin Zongqing's way of doing things was just a troublesome annoyance to Ling Lan, but a particular little brat had been utterly driven up the wall by him. Within the mind space, Little Four was throwing a violent tantrum. He felt that Lin Zongqing was taunting him, challenging him for his treasured position as Ling Lan's #1 follower. The infuriated Little Four lifted the kitchen knife in his hand up high, who knows where he got it from, and swung it around impassionedly. This caused Ling Lan's eyelid to twitch nervously, fearful that Little Four would accidentally cut himself. Vehemently, Little Four swished the kitchen knife down before him, raging, "I'll kill him, I must kill him." "Boss, don't you stop me." "But I've never even thought of stopping you." Ling Lan would really like to say that, but unfortunately she was afraid that Little Four would start to cry as if tears were free. That amount of tears would certainly be enough to turn her mind space into an endless ocean. And she really didn't want to drown to death. Head aching, she rubbed her forehead and said helplessly, "Little Four, are you able to kill him right now?" "Hells, how would an incorporeal Little Four kill a flesh and blood Lin Zongqing?" "Don't bring up things that are impossible, people will just laugh at you." Realizing how idiotic his actions have been thus far, Little Four threw away his little kitchen knife, and pounced on Ling Lan to cling to her thigh as he whined, "Boss, you'll definitely help me, right?" Was this how the rumored thigh-hugging two felt like? It truly feels pretty good. Little Four rubbed his face against Ling Lan's thigh. Although Little Four was still just a little bin right now, his actions were already moving towards becoming a little pervert. Unaware that she was being taken advantage of. Ling Lan stared at Little Four's shameless actions and a vein throbbed on her brow. She dearly wished she could just grab Little Four and give him a good beating. Unfortunately, she had already promised Little Four that she would not resort to domestic violence, so this wish had to be left unfulfilled. This made Ling Lan feel that she had agreed too hastily in the beginning. If she had only known then how much worry Little Four would cause her, she would definitely never have simply agreed to this condition just to cheer him up then. However, Little Four's next words thoroughly chased away all of these thoughts from Ling Lan's mind. Cold sweat started to flow freely from her pores, and even her legs felt a little weak. "Boss, just you wait, the moment he logs on to the virtual world, I'll definitely show him. I'll make sure he dies silently within the virtual world. He. Little Four's sinister demeanor caused the hairs on Ling Lan's back to stand. How had she forgotten about Little Four's powers within the virtual world? Finally understanding that Little Four's words were not just idle threats, Ling Lan panicked. That's right. Although she did feel that Lin Zongqing was bothersome, and also wanted to get rid of this bother, that didn't mean she wanted him to die. No matter what, Lin Zongqing was still an adorable little kid. Although she didn't like this kid so much since he was a little complicated. She rushed to talk down Little Four, speaking gently to try and dispel this terrifying notion from Little Four's mind. "Little Four, don't worry, that punk is no threat to you. Little Four will forever be the most precious follower in my mind." At this moment, Ling Lan was unstinting with all the flowery sweet talk she could muster, just so she could get rid of Little Four's killing intent. All this to save a totally irrelevant villager, eh? Why was life so hard? Ling Lan's words made Little Four blush instantly. Happily wriggling his little bottom, he asked coyly, "The most precious, most important, #1 follower, right? Ling Lan nodded decisively. That's right. Little Four is my most precious, most important, number one follower. No one can take away your position. So Little Four, you can just enjoy looking down upon the other followers fighting beneath you. She had never thought of continuing to collect followers though. Why did the conversation take such a weird turn as she was speaking with Little Four? Damn it. It must be Little Four's fault. He must have some strange ability to distort the topic of conversation. Ling Lan resolutely put all the blame on Little Four. Little Four had no idea what Ling Lan was thinking, but hearing what Ling Lan said, he seemed to come to some realization. Boss, I understand now. You mean, those other followers are all followers of this follower, he said, pointing to himself gleefully. Ling Lan could almost cry. That wasn't really what she meant, right? Unfortunately, at that moment, she didn't dare not to nod. If Little Four went crazy again, it could be predicted that half a year later, a large swath of special Class A students would be dead. That would definitely result in a terrifying upheaval, and she would most likely be implicated. Therefore, she needed to stop Little Four now. Alright. So Ling Lan didn't really have the saintly love of a matron goddess. In the end, she was still just looking out for herself. Decision made. Ling Lan nodded again firmly. In her mind, a scene formed where Qilong, Han Jijian, Luo Lang, and the others were chasing the kitty Little Four around yelling out "Big Bro," while Little Four had his little hands on his waist, laughing long and loud into the sky above. Ling Lan was instantly pained, sweating internally as she made a silent apology. Sorry dear brothers, for the sake of world peace, and humanity's safety, you all will just have to put up with this. Because she had never imagined that she would actually bring this nuclear weapon down upon this world, she was culpable. Finally, it seemed that Little Four was hit by Ling Lan's candy-wrapped missiles, and calmed down. He stated grandly that he would be merciful, and let that Lin Zon King go this once. When Ling Lan heard this, she immediately turned up the sugar level, cajoling Little Four until he was all smiles again, no longer having any thought of almost losing his precious number one follower position. Only then could Ling Lan relax and turn her attention to the sticky problem of Lin Zon King. When all was said and done, the root of all the problems was Lin Zon King. This time, Ling Lan no longer wanted to reject diplomatically. She pushed the USB drive back directly, and said coolly, I don't need it. She had even refrained from putting it more politely. Do you see how much effort she was expending just to save this fellow? Even Qilong and the others had had to pay a painful price for this objective, although they weren't aware of it. Ling Lan's brusque refusal froze Lin Zon King's expression, but he soon regained his composure. He hesitantly took back the Blu-ray USB drive, and pretended not to notice Ling Lan's cool dismissal, continuing to ask with a smile, Classmate Ling Lan, where will you all be going later? There was just one period of Mandarin class in the early afternoon, and then it was all free time until lunchtime. As Ling Lan's personal attendant, Lin Zon King needed to know what Ling Lan was going to do next. Ling Lan merely glanced coolly at him, saying nothing. Ling Lan already had no more patience to continue going back and forth with Lin Zon King. Beside her, Han Jijian seemed to have picked up on Ling Lan's mood, so he spoke up, Lin Zon King, we do not welcome you here, and we do not need your so-called service. We hope that you do not come looking for our boss Lan anymore. Being rejected formally and verbally for the first time, Lin Zon King could no longer maintain his smile. His face fell and he looked at Ling Lan with a troubled expression. However, this time he did not continue to cling on with words, but just bowed politely to Ling Lan before he turned and left. Lin Zon King's abrupt departure puzzled Qilong. What does he mean by that? Will he not bother us anymore? Uncertainly, Luo Lang replied, probably. We've already said it so clearly. Han Jijian watched Lin Zon King's gradually departing figure, and his brows furrowed as he said, Boss Lan, this person is probably not so easy to chase off. Ling Lan nodded. Yes, him sticking to me is not because he lost the challenge, but for some other purpose. Han Jijian was startled. What purpose? He had not sensed anything at all. thinking all this time that Lin Zonking was simply doing this so he could fulfill his bet, to show how trustworthy he was and gain some brownie points in the teacher's eyes. At this moment, Han Jijian felt a little lost. He had self-categorized himself as the intelligent strategist in Ling Lan's group. He had categorized himself this way because his combat ability was no match for Qi Long's. Qi Long was a natural-born fighter, certain to be a high-level mecha operator in the future. Already aware of Qi Long's superior combat prowess, Han Jijian was mentally prepared, and so wasn't too depressed by it. But he had never expected that Luo Lang, who joined in later on, would also be stronger than him in combat ability. This caused him to abruptly lose his self-set place, so he had no choice but to search for a different position he could fill. Very quickly, he had noticed that their group was still lacking a wise strategist. With regards to this character setting, Han Jijian felt that he was quite suited to the task, so although he didn't state it outright in front of his companions, his actions and the learning courses he chose all started leaning in that direction, a clear sign of his determination. However, Ling Lan's words floored him once again. Could it be that he wasn't suited for this character setting after all? The more Han Jijian thought about it, the more insecure he felt, and his mood dipped significantly. Seeing Han Jijian's expression change, Ling Lan felt a headache coming on again. Why did these little fellows by her side all require so much care? Ling Lan could only deepen her eye smile and say, "Actually, I'm not too sure myself. It's just that every time Lin Zonking looks at me, his gaze gives me that sort of feeling. Perhaps I'm just thinking too much." Although Ling Lan's expression was a little exaggerated to the point of suspicion, those words weren't actually lies. She really still wasn't sure what Lin Zonking's motives were in trying so hard to get on her good side. However, Ling Lan wasn't anxious. She believed that with the passage of time, she would naturally learn of the others' plan. Besides, they were all just 6-year-old brats right now, not involved in much power struggles for wealth or political clout. No matter how much Lin Zonking plotted, not much harm could come to Ling Lan. This was yet another reason why Ling Lan was not at all impatient, and could just ignore Lin Zonking. Ling Lan's words let Han Jijian temporarily push away the uncertainty in his heart. With a serious expression, he said, "Since Boss Lan has said so, there must be something wrong with Lin Zonking. We need to be a little more careful." Despite Ling Lan's rather ambiguous explanation involving intuition, Han Jijian decided to put his faith in her full-heartedly, and started cautioning the others to be more alert. It wasn't just Han Jijian who trusted Ling Lan, even Qi Long and Luo Lang were the same, nodding firmly to show that they understood. The unquestioning faith of her companions surprised Ling Lan slightly, and an indescribable swell of warmth rose within her heart. Was this what was meant by the trust of one's companions? In her previous life, Ling Lan had always been stuck in the hospital, constantly struggling at the border between life and death. She had never experienced what the term companion meant, but now, Ling Lan felt as if she understood it a bit better. It was soon proved that Han Jijian's judgment was very accurate. Lin Zonking was not someone who easily backed down. At noon, Ling Lan and the others had just walked into the school canteen when they heard a familiar voice cry out, "Classmate Ling Lan, here, over here." Ling Lan lifted her head and looked over, and saw Lin Zonking waving at them enthusiastically with a wide smile on his face, just as if that awkward situation earlier that afternoon had not happened at all. She was thoroughly impressed by Lin Zonking's thick skin. Already having been denied so heartlessly, how could he still greet them so passionately? This child's resilience was really just too strong. Qi Long and the others looked at one another, unsure how they were supposed to react. All their lives, they've never met such an agreeable child. They couldn't find it in themselves to keep rejecting Lin Zonking in the face of his unreserved smile. Even the typically cold-hearted Han Jijian had nothing to say. Ling Lan exhaled a quiet breath. Fine. She too found it impossible to continue refusing such a resilient child, so she said, "Let's get to know him a little better. The four of us, against one of him, no matter how you look at it, we won't lose." These words were unanimously approved by all three of her companions, and so they headed towards the beckoning Lin Zonking. However, internally, Ling Lan was more vigilant than ever. This Lin Zonking was so unbelievably tolerant. What he wanted must not be trivial. She couldn't help but sigh again. The children of this world were definitely non-human. Even with 2 lives worth of experience, she could only stay ahead of them by a little. If she compared her true 6-year-old self from her previous world with these children, she would undoubtedly lose all the way to distant Siberia. 4. Chapter 71. Lin Zonking's objective. The actions of Ling Lan's 4-man group surprised Lin Zonking for a beat, but he was then overcome by a surge of joy. In all honesty, when he had greeted them, his heart was pounding, for he was afraid that Ling Lan and her group would just ignore his existence. Unexpectedly, Ling Lan and her friends were really headed in his direction. This made him suspect for a moment that he was in a dream. Lin Zonking's tenacity and perseverance had gained him the favor of the simple-minded organism Qilong, afraid that his sharp-tongued mate Han Jijian would say something to hurt Lin Zonking. Qilong hurriedly called out, "Lin Zonking, why are you looking for us?" Naturally, Qilong's goodwill was felt by the perceptive Lin Zonking. With a grateful glance at Qilong, he said smiling, "I just wanted to tell classmate Ling Lan that I've found him a seat." Although Lin Zonking had been smiling at them all this while, it was normally just a polite facade, but this time, his smile seemed to be somewhat genuine. For the first time, Ling Lan felt that Lin Zonking actually looked pretty cute when he smiled. Han Jijian frowned slightly, and his originally cold expression became even colder. Meanwhile, Luo Lang sniffed, as if displeased at Lin Zonking's unnecessary action. It was true though, a redcoat student would never lack for a seat. If they found a seat they liked, as long as the seat wasn't occupied by another redcoat student, they need only walk up to that person, and without having to say a word, the student dressed in a uniform of any other color would automatically relinquish their seat. Of course, Ling Lan's group of 4 would never do such a tasteless thing. The dining area was very large, so there would always be some seats open. They just needed to spend a little time looking, that's all. Lin Zonking was unconcerned with what Luo Lang and the others thought. Solicitously, he pulled out one of the chairs and said to Ling Lan, "Classmate Ling Lan, please sit here." Ling Lan looked at his slightly fawning face, and thought back on that slightly sincere smile, and felt her heart soften. So, she did not refuse, sitting on the chair he had pulled out. After all, Lin Zonking was just a 6-year-old child. Ling Lan, who was really a quirky auntie at heart, was truly unable to resist such a little kid. Seeing Ling Lan take a seat, Qilong and the others quickly chose a seat before them at random and sat down as well. Ling Lan's first ever concession to him was obviously a good sign. Suppressing the emotional upheaval within himself, Lin Zonking asked carefully, "What would classmate Ling Lan and your friends like to eat? Let me bring it over for you all." Bring and not buy. Lin Zonking very clearly articulated to Ling Lan and the others what his bottom line was in terms of service. Ling Lan cast a searching look at Lin Zonking. This child was just too artful with words and phrasing. He avoided offending them, but also didn't let himself be pushed into a corner. As long as this type of person got a chance, he would certainly become a commendable man. Ling Lan decided that she would give Lin Zonking that chance. She indicated for Lin Zonking to push his wrist communicator closer, and then used her own communicator to transfer some credits directly to Lin Zonking. Not much, just 240 credits, the exact amount to pay for 6 deluxe set meals. In this era, personal communicators not only could send and receive messages, but were also equipped with the ability to retain personal identification information, bank cards, and other miscellaneous services, truly providing multi-purpose convenience. 6 deluxe set meals, a double portion each for Qilong and I. Ling Lan pretended not to see Lin Zonking's stunned gaze, tonelessly listing out what they wanted to eat. Frankly, Lin Zonking could not be blamed for his reaction. Set meals were typically only chosen by children from the commoner families. Any child from a slightly better family background would basically order separate dishes which had an overall better taste. Lin Zonking did not know that Qilong's and the others' credits had long ago been confiscated by Ling Lan on the first day of school. Since then, the communicators of the five of them, including Qilong, as well as the two girls always hanging out with them, had never contained more than 1,000 credits. Thus, their every meal changed from the luxurious spread of delicacies they began with, to the current simplistic set meals, though these set meals were still of the deluxe variety. Even so, this was undoubtedly many brackets below what they were having before. Of course, this wasn't a baseless decision by Ling Lan. Through Little Four's research, they found that the food groups within the Academy's deluxe set meal could fully provide all the nutrition that the children needed. Even Ling Lan and Qilong, who had extraordinarily high metabolisms, were able to fuel their bodies sufficiently by eating a double portion of said set meal. Of course, Ling Lan would never tell Qilong and the others that after she went home, she still had to supplement her diet with a gargantuan supper. It couldn't be helped. Ling Lan was a glutton to begin with, and on top of that, every night she would be tormented ceaselessly by instructor number 5, so her energy consumption was rather off the scales. Lin Zonking very quickly regained his composure, and he felt the stirrings of gratefulness within his heart. Was this Ling Lan and the others' strange way of preserving his dignity? He said nothing, only casting a brief complicated look at Ling Lan before nodding heavily and leaving to help them get their food. Looking at Lin Zonking's departing back, Han Jijian's frown eased slightly. With a hint of uncertainty, he asked, "Boss Lan, you seem to have some admiration for him?" Hearing this, Qilong and Luo Lang turned to look at Ling Lan, and waited for her answer. This would affect how they would treat Lin Zonking, whether he should be considered as a companion or not. The treatment would be completely different. "Yes, I have some admiration for his tolerance. If we were to switch places, I don't think I'd be able to bend as far as he has." Carrying out one's responsibilities while tolerating shame was not something everyone could do. Even Ling Lan, with her 2 lives of experience, could not say for sure that she'd be able to endure it. Ling Lan's words caused Qilong and the others to descend into a thoughtful silence. Lin Zonking's humility had made them forget that he was only 6 years old just like them. What kind of experiences had he lived through to have learned to be so tolerant? Right at that moment, the sounds of a commotion could be heard coming from not too far away. Ling Lan and the others all turned to look, and saw a significant crowd surrounding a lone figure. Among those in the crowd were students dressed in red, as well as those dressed in uniforms of other colors, while the one being surrounded was definitely wearing bright red clothes. They seemed to be arguing, which greatly surprised Ling Lan and her group. After all, the hierarchy within the school was clear. Unless it was an uncompromisable conflict, the students in school uniforms of any other color would never challenge a redcoat student. For if they were caught by the school disciplinary committee, it wouldn't end well for them. "It's Lin Zonking," exclaimed Luo Lang in surprise. From his position, he could just see the profile of the redcoat student being surrounded. The ones surrounding him seemed to include some of our classmates. Han Jijian had also seen some familiar faces in the crowd, and his frown deepened. Although Lin Zonking was ranked lowest within their class, in last place, his popularity within the class was still pretty good. What reason could there be for him to be in a standoff with their classmates? "It's Li Yingji's group," said Qilong with clear dislike. Ever since Qilong had helped Li Jingong brush off Li Yingji, within the class, the two of them were constantly at odds. Every time they met, they couldn't resist exchanging a few barbed words. If one had to name Qilong's most hated person within the academy, Li Yingji would be it. Right now, in the first grade special class A, there was the incipient formation of 2 clear power bases. One of the power groups was Li Yingji's. Having the prestige of being at the top of the rankings, he naturally drew a portion of the students to his side. Meanwhile, the other power group was Ling Lan's party. In contrast with Li Yingji's abstract rank, The strength displayed by Ling Lan's one-move defeat of Lin Zongking was much more persuasive. Many students did not really acknowledge the legitimacy of Li Yingji's ranking. After all, part of it was just based off interviews, and not truly earned through real battle with other students. This situation was very vexing for Li Yingji, causing jealousy and hate against Ling Lan to rise within him. He believed that it was Ling Lan who was hindering his steps towards uniting the first-grade special class A under his rule. After some thought, Ling Lan said, "Let's go find out what's going on." Lin Zongking was currently on an errand for them after all. It was the morally right thing to have a little concern for him. The four of them walked over to the scene of the commotion and heard the surrounding students in lively whispered discussion. After listening for just a moment, the four of them had gotten a rough idea of the situation. It turned out that when Lin Zongking was passing by Li Yingji's group, he had been stopped by one of the lackeys dressed in white. The lackey had ordered Lin Zongking to go see Li Yingji for a talk. Although Lin Zongking's family background was common, and he was in last place within Special Class A, he still had the pride of a redcoat student. How dare an insignificant white-coat student order him around with such a tone? He naturally did not respond well, refusing tersely without any concern for politeness. If that lackey had just stopped there, this matter would have been swept away just like that. Unexpectedly, the lackey had brashly grabbed hold of Lin Zongking. Enraged, Lin Zongking had immediately sent the white-coat lackey flying with one kick. Lin Zongking's actions were taken as provocation by Li Yingji's group, who all jumped up in anger and surrounded him, demanding that he apologize. And so this scenario was the result. Right then, Lin Zongking's expression was extremely dark. If it wasn't for his extraordinary tolerance, he most likely would have already started throwing punches, and this standoff wouldn't have happened. The appearance of Ling Lan's group of four made Lin Zongking's expression lighten a little, a trace of astonished delight flashing through his eyes. On the other hand, when Li Yingji saw Ling Lan and her group, his expression darkened noticeably, looking a little grim, but was mostly disgruntled. It looked like he was unhappy with Ling Lan's group butting in. Suddenly, Ling Lan's steps paused. With a strange expression, she looked at Lin Zongking, a possibility flashing rapidly through her mind. Was Lin Zongking's tolerant behavior these past few days just so he could depend on her to handle Li Yingji and his group? When Ling Lan stopped, Qilong and the other two stopped as well. Although they didn't know why Ling Lan had stopped, it was already a habit for them to follow Ling Lan's movements, so they also stopped without hesitation. Seeing Ling Lan's group stopping still, Li Yingji's expression eased a little. He was very pleased at Ling Lan's understanding of the situation. He really didn't want Ling Lan to come interfere in his plans at this moment, and Lin Zongking was his first target. In contrast, when Lin Zongking saw Ling Lan staying put, his expression changed. He could vaguely sense Ling Lan's intent to just observe from the sidelines, and this troubled him. His initially somewhat calm expression dimmed significantly, and there was actually an almost unnoticeable trace of despair in his eyes. Ling Lan frowned deeply, troubled and a little puzzled. If Lin Zongking could thicken his skin and suck up to her, then why couldn't he do the same with Li Yingji? Could he have some other unknown reason for this? With a shift in thought, Ling Lan decided that she would help out Lin Zongking this one time. After all, doing so was no skin off her nose. She was already on bad terms with Li Yingji anyway. Her halted steps resumed once more. Ling Lan's actions rekindled Lin Zongking's deadened and hopeless eyes, and there was even a hint of gratefulness within his newly brightened gaze. Chapter 72, a response which exceeds expectations. Ling Lan moved, and the three followers behind her moved with her. Very quickly, they were all standing before Li Yingji. Lin Zongking, why haven't you bought the set meals? Ling Lan's tone was brusque. If he wanted to borrow her strength, then Lin Zongking should understand that this strength was not so easily borrowed. What needed to be paid still needed to be paid. Ling Lan had no intentions of working for free. Ling Lan's words settled Lin Zongking, and he responded, "Classmate Ling Lan, I'm sorry for making you wait. He swept his gaze towards Li Yingji's group as if telling Ling Lan that they were the culprits stopping him from buying the food. Ling Lan obligingly followed Lin Zongqing's gaze to cast her attention upon Li Yingji's group, and with affected surprise, she quirked a brow and said, "Oh, it's classmate Li. What's up? Do you all have some business with Lin Zongqing?" Ling Lan's surprised look was so obviously fake that Li Yingji's face immediately flushed with anger. Ling Lan had clearly seen him here from the start but was so blatantly lying. Through gritted teeth, he said, "Oh, so it's classmate Ling Lan. I do have some business with him." If Ling Lan wanted to pretend, then he would play along and pretend as well. He was sure he could pretend even better than Ling Lan. Ling Lan nodded, and said almost casually, "Then let's do this on a first-come first-served basis then. Classmate Li, why don't you wait till classmate Lin has completed my requests first before coming to look for him again?" As if suddenly thinking of something, Ling Lan added, "A month later sounds about right." A little coyly, she continued, "Classmate Lin lost to me, you see. So no matter what, he needs to serve me for a month first. So sorry to let you down." Ling Lan's words almost caused Li Yingji to spew blood. This was basically telling him that Lin Zongqing was now under Ling Lan's protection. Li Yingji could no longer maintain a friendly appearance. With a frigid expression, he said lowly, "Ling Lan, you're really going to oppose me now?" Ling Lan's expression was innocent as she asked Lin Zongqing, "Classmate Lin, do you want to stop carrying out the terms of the bet you lost when you lost the challenge?" Lin Zongqing shook his head firmly. "No." With a helpless look on her face, Ling Lan shrugged at Li Yingji. "Classmate Li, it's not that I want to oppose you, but classmate Lin isn't ready to break his promise." Ling Lan's expression seemed to imply that Li Yingji was barking up the wrong tree by being angry at her. This performance by Ling Lan made Li Yingji even angrier. Yet he couldn't find any way to refute what Ling Lan had said. His face flushed an even deeper red in bottled anger. Ling Lan was unconcerned with the near-exploding Li Yingji. Turning her head, she said to Lin Zongqing, "Why are you still standing there? We're almost starving to death." "Yes, classmate Ling Lan, I'll bring your lunches over immediately." Ling Lan's response had already surpassed Lin Zongqing's expectations. He was a little groggy, unsure why the thus far cold and unfriendly Ling Lan would help him this much. Initially, he had only wished for Ling Lan to confirm that he was serving him, just so he had an excuse to refuse Li Yingji. Ling Lan was satisfied. She directed a slightly apologetic smile at Li Yingji, and then led Qilong and the others away from the area. This almost dismissive attitude was quickly driving Li Yingji mad. He wanted to stop Ling Lan and teach him a good lesson, but he just damnably couldn't find a usable excuse. Right then, he hated the fact that he was within the Central Scout Academy. If this were the outside world, he would definitely use his power and authority to take care of this detestable, arrogant bastard before him. Right now, in his eyes, even Ling Lan's most normal attitude would be taken as a personal taunt. When the boss gets mad, it was naturally up to the followers to help the boss take out his anger. A lackey boy dressed in a white school uniform leapt out, but knowing that Ling Lan's group wasn't something he could handle, he didn't dare to say anything to them. Instead, he set his sights on the seemingly more beliable Lin Zongqing. "Lin Zongqing, don't you dare leave. If you leave, I'll make it so your life's hell." Perhaps this punk had gotten used to being an arrogant little SHT since young, for his first impulse was to threaten. Thing was, his threat made all the watching students burst out into laughter, and of course, this laughter was filled with mockery. This mocking laughter caused the white coat lackey's face to flush and pale erratically. In that moment, he just couldn't figure out why he was being laughed at. Actually, he couldn't be blamed for this. It wasn't unusual for new students who had just entered the Central Scout Academy to find it difficult to adapt to their new roles within the school, particularly those second-generation young lords who were used to getting their way from young. It was even easier for them to make a mistake. Only once they had tasted the bitter consequences would they understand that the world within the Central Scout Academy was entirely different from their previous world. In this world where the strong dominate and everything was based on personal strength, The distinction between the elite and the humble was represented by the color of their school uniforms. Every 6 months, the internal academy re-ranking was the chance for the students to find a new foothold in life. Therefore, how could a white coat student threaten a red coat student? The school disciplinary committee would make them understand that the results of violating the color hierarchy was not something they could bear. Li Yingji glared fiercely at that follower who still didn't know that he had violated the school rules. No matter how much Lin Zongking was ignored within Special Class A, he was still a red coat student. How could a white coat student threaten a red coat student so brazenly? If the academy administration found out, this follower of his would be in a world of trouble. Lin Zongking turned his head, casting a scornful look at that white coat student. I would really like to see how exactly you would make my life hell. Although he was meek by necessity within Special Class A, this didn't mean that he would take bullying from the students of the other classes. The red clothes he was wearing represented his status, his dignity. The white coat lackey still looked as if he wanted to say something when Li Yingji said curtly, "Heef." Sensing Li Yingji's rage, the white coat lackey, otherwise known as Heef, didn't dare to say anything more. Li Yingji looked at Lin Zongking, and asked coldly, "Lin Zongking, you've really decided?" Lin Zongking's family background was common, and his strength wasn't outstanding in Special Class A, which was why Li Yingji had initially set Lin Zongking as his first target. He had intended to make Lin Zongking his subordinate, and then slowly tame the other Special Class A students until he finally managed to achieve full control of Class A. What a pity this Lin Zongking was such a stubborn fellow, actually ignoring his invitation from the very beginning, until his direct refusal at the end. Not just that, Lin Zongking had aligned himself with the group of people he hated the most. Yes, I, Lin Zongking, always mean what I say. Lin Zongking's demeanor was tough and intractable, leaving no retreat for himself. If small obstacles like this could cause him to shrink back, he would never have been able to survive those couple of years in the laboratories. While other children were growing up under the care and affection of their parents, he had already learned how to think for himself, knowing that he would have to depend on himself to obtain the life he wanted. Fine, in that case, I won't force the issue. Li Yingji was straightforward when it came down to it. He truly let go of the idea of recruiting Lin Zongking to his side right then. With a cold expression, he turned to his band of followers and said, "Why are you all still standing? Sit down and eat." All of his followers were students with uniforms of other colors, so of course they didn't dare to ignore Li Yingji's orders. They all quickly sat down and began eating. No longer surrounded, Lin Zongking finally released a sigh. Having Li Yingji give up on his own was the best outcome for him. Still, he didn't let his guard down yet, afraid that Li Yingji was only distracting him with empty words, but was actually planning to deal with him privately. Lin Zongking knew very well that, with his current abilities, he could not stand up to Li Yingji. The principle of survival of the fittest was protecting him, yet placing him in danger at the same time. The moment Li Yingji decided to go after him, he would definitely be in trouble. This was the reason why he was willing to stoop so far to insinuate himself into Linglan's group's favor. Indeed, from the very first day of school, Li Yingji had already set his eye on Lin Zongking. Meanwhile, Lin Zongking had no intention whatsoever of becoming anyone's follower. 6 years of life within a laboratory had been enough. He wasn't about to so easily let go of the precious freedom he had regained. Yet, he couldn't stand up to Li Yingji with his own strength, and so he had cracked his head trying to think of a way to help him out of this mess. Initially, Lin Zongking had been banking on Qilong or Luo Lang. Their challenge battles on the first day to get the seats they wanted had shown Lin Zongking just how strong they were. They had respectively managed to defeat the initial rank 5 and rank 8 of the class without much trouble, suggesting that their strength was on par with the top 3 of the original ranking. However, he had then inadvertently heard Qilong and Luo Lang talking about their absent boss Ling Lan, and changed his mind. Since that absentee had the ability to be the boss of these two formidable students, Ling Lan's strength must not be any weaker than that of Li Yingji's. As long as he could borrow some of Ling Lan's power, he should be able to escape the clutches of Li Yingji. And so, this had led to his challenge towards Ling Lan. From the very beginning of the challenge, he had already known that he would lose. However, what he wanted wasn't victory, but to lose the challenge so he could obtain the punishment of serving the other for a month. A month's worth of buffer time was sufficient for him to grow and improve so that he could find a better way to handle Li Yingji. The result of all this strategizing was worth it. Although Lin Zonking wasn't sure if Li Yingji had truly let go, he could at least avoid Li Yingji's outright forceful maneuvering, having earned some breathing space. Lin Zonking, who was waiting for the service robot to deliver the set meals, thought about all that had happened thus far. He clenched his fists, eyes shining with a fierce light. As long as he had enough time, he would no longer let anyone be in a position to threaten him again. An intense desire to grow stronger blazed high within Lin Zonking's heart. Meanwhile, at that moment, Ling Lan, who had been waiting at the dining table for Lin Zonking to bring the set meals over, was talking with Qilong and the others when, suddenly, her expression tightened minutely, but the change was quickly smoothed away. Her strange expression lasted for only a microsecond, and had not been picked up by Qilong or any of the others. Little 4, enlarge and dissect that expression of Li Yingji's. Ling Lan ordered Little 4 within the mind space. Yes, boss. Little 4 was very excited. Finally, it was his chance to shine again. He must live up to the title of #1 follower after all. In the mind space, the trace of vicious anger in Li Yingji's eyes was enlarged by Little 4, and then it was studied closely, up, down, left, right, near, far, and from multiple angles. After much comparison and checking, it was confirmed that the target of that gaze was Lin Zonking. Boss, what do we do next? Little 4 seemed ready to stir up some trouble. Ling Lan rolled her eyes at him. Do what? Donut 1. Just go back and rest. Since Li Yingji's target was Lin Zonking, then she wasn't going to spend time worrying about it. Ling Lan was not a saint. Lin Zonking, helping him once was already her being merciful. Subsequently, whether or not he could tide the waves was all up to himself. Translator's thoughts. Ruxinji, Happy New Year in advance with an advance extra chapter. There'll be a longer chapter coming up at the usual time in a couple hours. Chapter 73, Ling Lan's Crisis. Time flew by, and very quickly. 5 months had passed. The atmosphere within the Central Scout Academy started becoming restless. For the mid-year wide-scale ranking which would decide the fate of the students for the next 6 months was about to begin. For the sake of doing well in this critical ranking, all the students in the Central Scout Academy were hard at work making their final preparations. Ling Lan had passed these past few months uneventfully, not standing out, but not being lost in the masses either. However, after Lin Zonking's challenge, Ling Lan hadn't fought with anyone else again. Even during physical combat class, when her classmates would spar with one another to improve, Ling Lan had also refused to fight. Of course, at the start, in the first month after school began, Ling Lan would still enter the combat hall to hold sparring practices with Qilong, Luo Lang, and Han Jijian. But these practices hadn't gone on for long when, in one of the later battles, Ling Lan had lost control and seriously injured Qilong by accident. After that incident, Ling Lan had adamantly refused to spar ever again, only allowing Qilong and the other two to spar with one another. Honestly, it wasn't that Ling Lan didn't want to spar and exchange tips with her friends. She had her own considerations for this, because she had discovered that, when going through the number 5's most recent so-called ultimate training method, a strange fluctuation would appear in her spiritual power after every night of training she endured. As time went by and the nights accumulated, this strange fluctuation just got stronger and stronger. She had been constantly nervous, wondering what this strange phenomenon would bring, but no changes appeared in her daily movements, so she could only set the matter aside temporarily. But gradually, she realized that whenever she was fighting, especially when she entered attack mode, it was all too easy for her to descend into a bloodthirsty frenzy, and she would be filled with the desire to destroy everything in sight. In the beginning, she had still been able to contain this desire, so she thought that she was strong enough to overcome these negative emotions caused by the insane training. However, with the passing of time, she found it harder and harder to control the force of these negative emotions. She started having doubts, wondering if something had gone wrong with her spiritual state. After injuring Qilong, Ling Lan finally understood. There was indeed something wrong with her. Her spiritual power had gotten out of control. Number 5, who was said to have driven countless talents insane, had similarly caused Ling Lan to develop a spiritual issue after tormenting her for a month. Thus, Ling Lan no longer dared to join in the fights. She was afraid that she would really kill Qilong and the others next time. If that happened, it would definitely be too late for regrets. Qilong and the others knew why Ling Lan refused to fight, so when other students challenged her, Qilong and Luoling had stepped forward. They said that if the students wanted to challenge their boss, they would have to get through them first, as they were Ling Lan's followers. And there were those who really were skeptical whether they would follow through, but when the third ranked of their class put forth his challenge, Qilong had immediately stepped in to accept on Ling Lan's behalf. This time, the challenge was again set as an open arena battle, drawing the attention of the students of the Central Scout Academy. School hadn't started for long, but the first grade Special Class A had already requested for an open arena battle twice. This gave the upper grade seniors the uniform impression that this year's new students were certainly a violent lot. Of course, this also increased their anticipation for the upcoming mid-year rankings. Would the rankings of the first grade Special Class A change drastically? If that really happened, it would likely establish a brand new record within the academy. Mind you, in the past, the rankings of Special Class A had always been pretty much stable and unchanging. Qilong and the third-ranked boy had fought bitterly for an hour, the battle dragging on till the very last moment. In the end, Qilong's will proved to be stronger, and his stamina was better, and he successfully defeated his opponent. This result made the initially restless students shut up completely. Think about it. Even the third-ranked had lost. If anyone else wanted to challenge, they had better weigh their own capabilities once more before doing so. Qilong's reliable performance helped Ling Lan earn several months of peace, which also gave her time to resolve the troublesome issue of her out-of-control spiritual state. But as the mid-year wide-scale ranking loomed ever closer, the originally calm Ling Lan began to get agitated, because she had still not been able to find a solution to her problem. When the mid-year ranking tournament arrived, she would no longer be able to refuse the challenges of her peers, unless she chose to give up on her results and leave the special class to become a regular class student. This was a result that Ling Lan could not accept. After knowing what it meant to be in Special Class A and having experienced all its myriad benefits, Ling Lan wasn't so stupid as to let it go. That's right, Ling Lan really didn't want to stand out too much. But she also didn't want to become a weakling. She still wanted to be in control of her life, and become a truly free person. I must solve this problem, said Ling Lan, clenching her fists tight. Ling Lan knew very well that if she didn't resolve this issue, she would not be able to fight. The Central Scout Academy would never condone the existence of a homicidal maniac. Her loss of control was already at a rather severe stage. Now, whenever she fought, blood would flow like a river, and corpses would litter the ground. She could still clearly remember how she had failed in the most recent mission given by the learning space. This time, the mission she had received had been to rescue a hostage. However, she ended up killing everyone in the target area, including the hostage she was supposed to save. Consequently, she experienced the learning space's punishment for the first time. Ling Lan shuddered violently in recollection. That had certainly not been a great experience. The electricity coursing through her body, lingering, as she hovered on the edge of wanting to die yet being unable to die, wanting to live yet unable to live. That suffering was pretty much on par with number 5's perverse torments. She definitely never wanted to experience it again. Now Ling Lan finally understood. The so-called learning space was not a helpful cheat code, with the exception of Little 4. But was definitely a malicious glitch that existed to torment her. While Ling Lan was struggling with anxiety and helplessness, in the learning space, The great number 1 who Ling Lan had the utmost respect for was ripping apart instructor number 5's personal training space with extreme prejudice. At that moment, number 5 was busily plotting something inside. When he felt the ground shake and the mountains tremble, he looked at the rapidly disintegrating world around him and knew that the situation was not good. But just as he was about to run, a large hand clamped harshly over his neck. Number 5, I merely intended for you to train up Ling Lan's ability to withstand pressure and hardship, not destroy her. Number 1 steadily glared at number 5, a deep and seemingly unquenchable anger smoldering within his eyes. He was someone who put his full trust in his brothers and subordinates. Since he had decided to entrust Ling Lan to number 5 for training, he wouldn't interfere in the process. Thus, he hadn't been aware of the abnormality which had developed in Ling Lan's spiritual state. If number 9 had not been keeping a close watch on Ling Lan and noticed her strange behavior in time to notify him, he might have only found out the truth after Ling Lan had thoroughly descended into madness. Facing number 1's wrath, number 5 was still extremely calm. Helplessly, he said, "Number 1, I haven't destroyed her. She's just reached the point where she has to choose a Dao 1. Number 1's expression changed. How did this happen so quickly? My initial estimate was that she would only reach this stage 4 years later. Recalling something, number 1's expression turned frigid. With mounting anger, he asked, Number 5, did you break the agreement you made with me and used your extreme hell training method? Number 5 laughed, and his eyes were full of satisfaction. With that, number 1 understood everything. Overwhelmed with rage, he no longer held back, instantly slamming number 5 violently into the ground. With a resounding bam, number 5's training space was once again sent shuddering. Number 5's entire body had been slammed deeply into the ground, and only his face remained exposed above ground. This force wasn't easily borne. Number 5's expression was gruesome. The tearing pain didn't allow him to maintain his smile any longer. However, number 5 was unwilling to admit his loss just like that. He forced the corners of his lips to twitch into a smile and said, Number 1, don't blame me, who asked Ling Lan to be such a great piece of material. Originally, I really hadn't thought of using that method, but every time I set an outrageous mission for her, she still managed to ride it out. You just don't know how every time she completed a mission, I would get that much more excited. Even more unexpectedly, in half a month's time, besides the extreme hell method, she had already worn out my bag of tricks. All my insane training torments had been overcome by her. Number 5's expression turned a little wild. That resilience. It's abnormal. I've never encountered anything like it before. And so I became reckless with emotion. So, you broke the rules and let her into your extreme hell training method for training. You didn't know that doing so would destroy her, said number 1 with profound heartache. Ling Lan was the first person he had truly wanted to cultivate as an inheritor, but unexpectedly, due to his carelessness, she was on the brink of being destroyed by number 5. He, who had never regretted anything before, actually felt the stirrings of regret in this moment. No, I didn't destroy her. Number 1, did you know, she really passed it, the extreme hell training method. She's the only one who passed it and kept her mind. She has only become caught up in the confusion of Tao. The more number 5 spoke, the more excited he became, and his face was brimming with the fervor of success. Passed? You said Ling Lan passed? Number 1 couldn't believe it. Yes, she passed. The only regret is that she actually couldn't find her Tao. Number 5's face was filled with regret. In his visualizations, anyone who managed to pass the extreme hell training method, as long as they came out with their mind intact, would become a strong fighter possessing Tao. But Ling Lan was an oddball. She passed with a clear mind, but was unable to find the Tao that was right for her, and thus descended into chaotic confusion. How did this happen? Number 1 was also confused now, since he had faith in number 5's deductions. I suspect that it's because she doesn't have a purpose to become strong. Number 5's expression was a little strange. After spending these past few months with Ling Lan, he had gotten a vague sense of how Ling Lan thought. Ling Lan's thoughts were contradictory. She wanted to become a strong person, Yet she didn't want to stand out and be burdened with too much responsibility. Even more emphatically, she didn't want to be weak, unable to control her own destiny. As a result of these contradictions and doubts, although Linglan's spiritual power had already arrived at the doorstep of Tao, its weight was not substantial enough to push open the door to enter a more profound realm. For context, it should be known that once a person grasped the power of Tao, all aspects of their abilities would improve on a vertical axis. In future, regardless of what they wanted to do or learn, their progress would certainly cover 1,000 miles in one day too. Things that would have taken them 10 years to learn before, would very likely take them only 2 to 3 years to master. What Tao do you think she's most likely to enter? Number 1's expression was grim as he asked this. Number 5 was the most familiar with Linglan's condition. Number 1 needed to understand more, so he could figure out how to help Linglan choose the right Tao. Killing Tao. A while back, she failed a hostage rescue mission, the reason being that she killed everyone at the campsite, including the hostage, said Number 5 with a smile. If they left Linglan unchecked, then with the passing of time, it was almost a certainty that Linglan would enter the Killing Tao. Unacceptable. The Killing Tao is too bloody, incompatible with Linglan's personality. Number 1 rejected this Tao immediately. Frankly, the Killing Tao was also an extremely good Tao, except that anyone who walked this Tao must be able to become truly cold and emotionless, so it was unsuitable for Linglan. Linglan may look cold and aloof on the surface, but inside, she was actually a person who cared deeply. This was why she was willing to pretend to be a boy for Lan Luofeng's sake, and go through all the accompanying troubles. It was also the reason why when Qilong and the others had stuck to her and insisted on calling her boss, she had decided to just give in. It was why even when she knew Lin Zonking was just using her, Linglan had still chosen to help him out. The demonic Tao is also a possibility, choked out Number 5 amidst laughter. He actually knew well that Linglan was very against the Killing Tao, so it was highly probable that her heart would become troubled and conflicted, resulting in an internal demon. If the internal demon managed to fully develop, Linglan would have no other choice than to walk the demonic Tao in the end. Number 1 threw a cold glare at Number 5, causing his exposed head above ground to break out in a cold sweat. He received Number 1's meaning loud and clear. It was obvious that Number 1 hated his recklessness, which had resulted in this internal demon forming within Linglan, which may force her onto a path that Number 1 found distasteful. According to Number 1's original plans, 4 years later, Linglan would very naturally enter the gates of Tao. Then, she would have been able to smoothly transition into the problem-free sovereign Tao or perhaps the sage Tao. This was the Tao that Number 1 had intended for Linglan, for it was the broadest and most straightforward of Taos. Unfortunately, Number 5 had interfered. Although he had managed to push Linglan to the gateway of Tao within a terrifyingly short time, because Linglan's spirit wasn't ready yet, she was now plagued with a host of problems. Looks like Linglan needs to find her personal reason for becoming strong as soon as possible. But who can help her? Number 1 sighed. He wasn't good at handling this sort of psychological issues. I'll go. A clear voice rang out from behind Number 1. Number 9 appeared, her sweet face filled with killing intent, and the gaze she directed at Number 5 was almost heavy enough to kill. Number 5 raised his head to look up at the sky, pretending that he didn't see anything. Right now, he simply didn't dare to annoy Number 9, who was in full protective tiger mum mode. Number 1's expression eased and he said, "All right, Number 9, I'll leave Linglan to you." Number 9 nodded and quickly disappeared. Only then did Number 5 smile bitterly and look back. Finally, she's gone. Number 1, can you let me out now? Number 1 stared at him coldly, and then stomped firmly right on top of his head, sending him straight into the ground so he was truly buried alive. Then, Number 1 immediately disappeared from Number 5's training space. Not too long after, Number 5 miraculously resurfaced from within the earth. His expression was at ease as he said cheerfully, "So not just Number 9 has developed feelings, even Number 1 is affected. becoming more and more human. The experiment this time was very successful. Ling Lan truly possesses the ability to influence intelligent bioentities. The only thing left is whether this ability is beneficial or harmful to us intelligent bioentities. Still, it's really dangerous for Ling Lan this time. Did I really go overboard? If something really happens to Ling Lan, then wouldn't I lose a lot of entertainment? There's no other material with such resilience, capable of withstanding every single one of my newly developed training methods. Yes, looks like I'll have to think of a way to help her overcome this crisis. Number 5 was deep in thought. At this moment, he was completely unaware that he, who had never cared for whether a material lived or died, was actually worrying over Ling Lan. Translator's thoughts. Ruxinji, new developments for a new year. XD, may you all have a great year ahead. Sends good vibes. Chapter 74, Little Four's suggestion. Ling Lan had just lain down, when she felt her consciousness being forcefully dragged once more into the learning space. However, Ling Lan was now used to this. After all, the instructors in the learning space all just loved to contact her this way. This time, what she saw first wasn't the cold face of number 1, nor was it the twisted smile of number 5, instead, it was the delicate features of number 9. Seeing number 9's lovely face, Ling Lan felt as if she was healed instantly. Instructor number 9, overcome with emotion, Ling Lan pounced. She really hadn't seen instructor number 9 in so long. She had really missed her, but it wasn't up to her whether or not she could see a particular instructor. The learning space was the one who decided. Hugging instructor number 9 tightly, she could feel the generous swell of the other's bosom under her military uniform. Oh, the envy, jealousy, and hate that stirred within her. Heaven knows if she would be able to have such a voluptuous body like instructor number 9's when she grew up. Then, Ling Lan recalled her current identity as a fake man, and was instantly thrust into gloom. She had overheard her mother saying before that, once she hit puberty, she would need to be injected with blockers to prevent her body from secreting too much estrogen. In other words, if she could not reclaim her female status, then she would be destined to be just like how she was in her past life, flat as an airport runway 1. Number 9 looked at the emotional Ling Lan, and her heart was filled with fluffy feelings. It truly had been a while since she last saw Ling Lan, and she had missed her just as much. However, number 9 was still number 9 in the end. Her emotions were only visible for that short moment before she regained her usual cool and aloof appearance. She patted Ling Lan's shoulder before letting go, and then asked calmly, "Ling Lan, is something wrong with your spiritual self?" At this question, Ling Lan bowed her head dejectedly. Instructor number 9, so even you've found out about it? Yes, strange fluctuations appearing in your spiritual self. As an inhabitant of your mind, of course I can sense it. Number 9 explained why all the instructors knew. Of course, what number 9 didn't say, was that this was actually only possible if an inhabitant broke the rules, forcefully breaking boundaries to sense the host's condition. For that, number 9 had to pay a hefty price. This was the learning space's restriction upon the inhabitants, as well as protection for the host. If number 9 wasn't so concerned that number 5 would break Ling Lan, she wouldn't have committed this violation. Seeing Ling Lan in such low spirits, number 9 was anxious, not one to beat around the bush to begin with. She went straight to the point and asked, "Do you know why this situation is happening?" Ling Lan thought about it for a moment, and then replied uncertainly, "Is it because instructor number 5's training has created some negative emotions, which then influenced my emotional balance?" "No, that's not it," number 9 denied firmly. Seeing number 9 reject the reason she had thought was behind all this, Ling Lan was even more confused. "If that's not it, then what is it?" "It's your heart. It's filled with doubt and uncertainty." Number 9 announced the answer directly. Huh? Ling Lan hadn't expected this answer. Could doubt and uncertainty cause her spirit to twist so much that she would lose control? Ling Lan's first instinct was disbelief, that number 9 was just joking with her. But seeing number 9's steady gaze, Ling Lan could not be sure. "Ling Lan, although I do not know why your tolerance is so extraordinary, almost aberrant. It is why you were able to withstand all the tests and torments set for you by number 5. This has made your spiritual power grow very strong, very rapidly, to the point that you've even touched upon the gates of Dao. Dao? Ling Lan was even more bewildered. She was currently in a technologically advanced future world, not an ignorant medieval period when cultivation theory discussions were popular. You don't need to understand this right now. What I want to tell you is that this abnormality in your spirit is occurring because you do not have a clear purpose in your heart for becoming stronger. Number 9 knew she had slipped up, so she hurriedly tried to gloss over it. Purpose? By this time, Ling Lan's eyes were wide and round, dazed. Number 9 had thoroughly confused her, and her mind was spinning. Yes, you've accepted all the missions and training we've set for you, and endured them despite all the difficulty. Why? Ling Lan held her dizzy head in her hands as she desperately searched for an answer to the question. But number 9 stopped her. Don't be in a rush to answer, go back and think about it carefully. Think about what kind of future is it that you want, and what your reason is for wanting to grow stronger. Once you've figured this out, the spiritual problem bothering you now will go away and you'll return to normal. With that said, number 9 chased Ling Lan out of her training space. Just like that, Ling Lan came to the central hall of the learning space. At this time, Little Four was crouched in the center of the hall, drawing something on the ground with his butt stuck up in the air, completely oblivious to Ling Lan's arrival. Ling Lan calmed herself a little, and started to reflect on instructor number 9's words. Number 9 had undoubtedly given her some good news, which was that the loss of control of her spiritual power she was so worried about was not a huge problem. It could be healed naturally, as long as she could find the answer to dispel the doubt and uncertainty from her heart. But what were her doubts and uncertainties? Ling Lan was lost once again. Little Four, having finally completed his masterpiece, stood up, and was prepared to admire it for a good while when, with a subconscious lift of his head, he saw Ling Lan standing right before him. With a thump, Little Four fell over, and his first reaction was to wonder if his tricks had been noticed by Ling Lan. This noise startled Ling Lan, who raised her head to see Little Four sitting on the ground with a frightened look on his face. She couldn't help but frown and ask, "Little Four, what's going on?" Little Four hurriedly put on a fawning face and said sweetly, "Boss, why are you here?" With a pull of his right hand, a floor cushion appeared in his hand out of thin air. He carefully set down the cushion by his side and said submissively, "Boss, are you tired? Come sit here." At the same time, behind him where Ling Lan couldn't see, Little Four swiped his left hand and the picture on the ground before him was wiped clean, leaving no trace behind. Ling Lan's thoughts hadn't been on Little Four to begin with, preoccupied with her own internal dilemma. Hearing Little Four's reply, she didn't pry any further, but instead sat down with a long face by Little Four's side, sighing deeply. Knowing that he hadn't been found out, Little Four was instantly at ease. It was his duty as Ling Lan's number 1 follower to help his boss solve her problems, so seeing Ling Lan so troubled, he quickly opened his mouth to ask, "Boss, why are you sighing? Tell me about it. Maybe Little Four can help." Instructor number 9 said that my heart has doubts and uncertainties, and that I don't have a resolute will or purpose for becoming stronger. Of course, Ling Lan didn't really expect Little Four to be able to help her, but it was still nice to share one's troubles, so she spilled her worries to Little Four anyway. Little Four was very surprised, for he didn't think of that as a great problem at all. "Boss, what's there to worry about? If you don't have a purpose, you just need to find one." "Does it work that way?" Ling Lan was nonplussed. Could it be that she was overthinking it? Chapter 75, The Dream of Having Kids. Why wouldn't it? If you don't have a purpose, then let's just build one. Once you have a purpose, boss, then you won't be doubtful and uncertain anymore. The more Little Four spoke, the smugger he became, and then he abruptly realized that he truly was, as expected, one of the smartest of the intelligent bio-entities. It made sense. Ling Lan decided to try out Little Four's method. even though little Four really did seem rather flaky. Perhaps she would be able to luck out, like a blind cat stumbling over a dead rat, and stumble across the solution. Ling Lan contemplated for a long while, and then, with a face full of confusion, she asked, "Little Four, what purpose should I build exactly?" Little Four was speechless. Wasn't this something the boss should decide for herself? Why was she asking him? Still, Little Four was undoubtedly a dutiful follower. Without a word of complaint, he immediately browsed through his database, and word after highlighted word started popping out at him. Excitedly, Little Four said, "Boss, let's go dominate the galaxies." Ling Lan rolled her eyes dramatically at Little Four. "Do you take me for an idiot? Anyone who would do something so troublesome, putting in so much mental and physical effort for no praise to boot, must be an idiot. Then, how about becoming a king somewhere?" Little Four lowered his ambition by a large margin. "Not interested," said Ling Lan huffily. Couldn't Little Four give any more normal suggestions? She was definitely not the type of person who wanted to become a ruler. Ling Lan knew herself well enough to know that building a harmonious and perfect world. Becoming a peerless hero. Ling Lan was peeved. Suggesting all these grand ambitions, Little Four was obviously just mocking her. Damn it, she wasn't a saint. Under Ling Lan's increasingly displeased gaze, Little Four's voice became softer and softer. "Boo-hoo-hoo, boss, these are all search results from the database." Even if Ling Lan wasn't happy about it, there was nothing he could do. Oh, there was one more. Little Four suddenly noticed one unread result. "Right. We could start a harem and sow seeds." Although he didn't have a clue as to what start a harem and sow seeds meant, this phrase appeared at a rate no less than the previous suggestions. Hearing this, Ling Lan flew into a rage, immediately hammering a fist onto Little Four's head. "Idiot, I'm a girl. Damn it, sowing seeds was something men did, alright?" Besides, she didn't have a female queen mentality. Plus, she had been raised with the concept of one husband, one wife. As such, this was something that she simply could not accept. "So a girl can't sow seeds in a harem?" Little Four pouted, a little unconvinced. He really didn't understand what this had to do with gender. However, since boss clearly hated this one, of course it would be discarded without question. The two of them continued to puzzle over the issue, seated together with their faces resting within the cups of their hands, frowning heavily. 10 minutes passed, half an hour passed. And finally, an hour passed. Still unable to think of any good suggestions, Little Four was driven mad. Pulling at his own hair, he screamed, I really can't think of anything. What other great purposes are there?" "Great? Why does it have to be great?" Ling Lan seemed to have been triggered by Little Four and found a new avenue of thought. "Perhaps we could start thinking from small wishes." Little Four did not understand. "What do you mean?" "For example, Little Four, what is the goal you want to fulfill most right now?" Hearing this, Little Four puffed out his little chest and said, "I want to be boss's #1 follower." Ling Lan's was speechless. Didn't he have any slightly more ambitious thoughts? Besides, she had already declared him her #1 follower. Why was he still so caught up in this issue? Little Four seemed to have gotten the point though. He looked at Ling Lan with shining eyes and said, "Boss, what do you want to accomplish at the moment?" "Continue maintaining my position in Special Class A." Ling Lan's response was quick and without hesitation. This was truly what had been bothering her most recently. "Maintain? Don't you want to be first?" Little Four was puzzled. With Ling Lan's strength, getting first place should be a piece of cake. No plans for that. "Of course. If I get it by accident then that's fine too. I'm just going to go with the flow." Ling Lan wasn't too bothered by this issue. The moment she finished speaking, Ling Lan jolted. Could it be that the aimlessness and hesitation that instructor number 9 had mentioned was precisely this lackadaisical attitude of hers? Because she had always gone with the flow, accepting everything life gave her, be it her grades, her training, or even the training missions in the learning space. Honestly, she had never pursued any of it on her own initiative. "I've figured it out." Ling Lan felt enlightened. Could it be that I really should go after the first place ranking? Although Ling Lan felt that she was onto something here, her heart was still a little troubled. Deep inside, She didn't really want to make waves and push herself into the spotlight. Would forcing herself to do something she didn't want to do really resolve her current plight? Or would she just end up going further down the wrong path? If you don't feel like it, then leave it. After all, even if you get first place, there aren't that many benefits to it. The cost and benefits just don't match up. Little Four wasn't plagued by all those chaotic thoughts running through Ling Lan's mind. He was only looking for the answer purely from a cost-benefit standpoint. Obtaining first place, there was pretty much no benefit other than an increase in reputation, so Little Four was unconcerned about whether his boss became the first rank. Boss, you need to find something more profitable to do. Out of boredom, Little Four conjured a lollipop in his hand and licked it a couple of times. He believed that anything could be done, just not pointless work. More profitable? There really isn't anything. Ling Lan, who was all tapped out of desires, really couldn't think of anything that fit Little Four's criteria. Little Four was stumped. He gave a hard lick to his lollipop, and then very seriously said to Ling Lan, "Let's put it this way, boss. What kind of life do you want to have in the future?" "A peaceful, free one, and when I'm bored, I can give birth to a child, raise him, and play with him." A smile played on Ling Lan's lips. She really wanted a child of her own. If her two lives were added together, she really wasn't that young anymore. When Little Four heard what Ling Lan had to say, his expression turned miserable. Seeing Little Four's exaggerated expression, Ling Lan was irked. "What? I can't have a child?" "Of course you can," Little Four hastily reassured her. "But boss, have you not thought about your situation?" "Situation? About my identity as a fake man?" Ling Lan was abruptly brought back to reality. With this identity, it was basically fated that she wouldn't be able to wed someone openly. If she wanted to borrow sperm from some man, she'd even have to do it secretly. "I believe the Ling family will arrange for a loyalist to couple with me." Ling Lan wasn't worried that she wouldn't get a man, for Lan Luofeng and Ling Qin would never let the Ling family line die out. "Won't work," objected Little Four, agitated. "Huh? Why?" Ling Lan didn't understand. "Boss, you must know, whether a child is excellent or not is basically all up to the genes of the father one." Within this period of time, Little Four had been doing a lot of research on this topic on the virtual network. "Ah. So this means that no matter how great my genes are, it's useless?" Ling Lan was incensed. She would be the one giving birth to the child, but whether or not the child was excellent had nothing to do with her. That was just preposterous. Regretfully, Little Four said, "Of course, if the mother's genetics are better, the child will be even more outstanding, but the main load is still on the father. If the father's genetics are weak, the child's birth stats are almost guaranteed to be weaker. In other words, if I want my baby to be more outstanding, I cannot just find some random man." Ling Lan gnashed her teeth. "What kind of heredity is this? Why make the father's side so important?" "With schadenfreude too?" Little Four said. "That's right, boss. With my current circumstances, it's impossible to freely date a strong man, get married and have kids." Ling Lan finally understood the meaning behind Little Four's exaggerated expression. Of course, if Ling Lan didn't care for the stats of the baby, then all this wouldn't be a problem. However, Ling Lan was definitely a responsible mother. If she could let her baby be more outstanding, she would definitely not let her own baby take the lesser option. "Is there really no way to resolve this?" asked Ling Lan with a frown. She didn't believe that, no matter what, she would have a baby. No matter how difficult the process was, she would still accomplish it. This was all she wanted to do in this life. "There is two ways." Little Four was as reliable as ever, directly coming up with two options for Ling Lan. Number 1. Rob the Federation's sperm bank. "I believe there will be lots of strong men's sperm kept there." Little Four's words made Ling Lan's eyes light up, but his next words made Ling Lan's face fall. "However, you'll need to defeat the Ace Mecha Squad stationed there. Rumor has it that the leader is an Imperial operator." As a reminder, an Imperial operator is just one level below a God-class operator. For you to successfully steal the sperm from the bank, you'll need to have the capability close to that of a God-class operator. Otherwise, you'll be going in alive and coming out dead. And the other way? Ling Lan decisively discarded this option. She only wanted to have a kid, not seek death. Find a random strong man you like, push him down, and just have your way with him, said Little Four savagely. Ling Lan wanted to facepalm. Damn it. These two methods were just not something a normal person could do. I recommend you pick the second option. Going up against one strong man will definitely be easier than going up against a team of strong men, suggested Little Four considerately. Little Four's words didn't make Ling Lan's expression turn any better, because raping a strong man was definitely not an easy thing. Of course, you could also try seduction. If a strong man is willing to take a romp under the sheets with you, boss, then you wouldn't have to worry anymore. Little Four smiled in satisfaction, thinking that this suggestion of his was just amazing. Idiot. Ling Lan knocked Little Four's head exasperatedly. Which man would willingly romp under the sheets with another man, unless he was bent? But if he was bent, then she wouldn't be able to take it, because ultimately, she was still female. No, then boss, you'll just have to do it forcefully, said Little Four regretfully. Forcefully? Looks like I'll have to become even stronger or else I won't be able to overpower the other. Ling Lan racked her brains and found that what Little Four said made sense. For the sake of giving birth to an outstanding baby, she just had to break past her limits. Yup. Good luck, boss. You'll need to work harder from now on, or else you won't be able to raise an outstanding child. Little Four gave Ling Lan his encouragement. Suddenly, Ling Lan found that all her suffering at the learning space's hands was not meaningless. It would make her stronger, making it easier for her to achieve her goals. A child birthed by me, Ling Lan, must be the most excellent one. Ling Lan's eyes no longer held any trace of doubt or uncertainty. No one would be able to stop her from carrying out her resolution to give birth to an exceptional child. In that case, I must become the strongest so that I will have a greater range of selection. Because of this simple wish, Ling Lan stepped onto the path of the strong, no longer lost.